March 18, 1996 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Marc Mero quits WCW and heads to WWE. Get ready for Sable. Dave looks at the ECW phenom. Tons more by Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. March 18, 1996. Johnny B. Bad Marc Mero quit World Championship Wrestling on the morning of March 11 after an airport discussion with Eric Bischoff prior to his scheduled Monday Nitro appearance, and is expected to sign a 3-year deal with the World Wrestling Federation imminently. In addition, the Nasty Boys, who were let go last week in a measure to bring salaries under control with the addition to the books of big money deals for Scott Hall, Kevin Nash and the Steiner brothers, were also strongly rumored to be WWF bound, although after a meeting Tuesday with Bischoff, they were talked into staying. The Nasty Boys' non-appearance as advertised on the live Nitro event opened the door for the return of Rick and Scott Steiner, who faced the Road Warriors and even put them over. The Steiners' deal, to come in and work a program against the Road Warriors, was put together in midweek and no doubt was for a high dollar figure as well. It was explained on television that the Nasty Boys were taken to the hospital and it was left up in the air whether it was the Road Warriors or Steiners who had done it to them, which appeared to be a situation of burying them if need be, or creating a program for them with one of the two teams in the future if they were brought back. Bischoff didn't bury them on the air. The same can't be said about Bad. The situation with Mero and Bischoff turned into the major topic of discussion as he quit the company Monday morning, and was then buried big time on the air by Bischoff, who made comments about Bad blaming a woman for losing the TV title in a match on March 6 in Macon, Georgia, which aired on March 9 on WCW Saturday Night, saying he didn't feel up to showing up for his rematch with Lex Luger, and finally saying that Bad couldn't hang where the big boys play. Bad's TV title loss was not part of a burial because he was going to leave, as the situation all fell apart largely Monday morning after a few minor problems had developed earlier in the week. The gist of the situation is that Mero was working without a contract, as his most recent deal, said by WCW sources to be in the $300,000 per year range, had expired on February 28. He had been offered a 2-year deal, rumored to be in the same dollar range. However, there were other things in the contract that weren't settled. Among the items were the quarterly windows, which allows WCW to fire wrestlers under contract and have no further obligation to them. According to those close to Mero, he went to Winston-Salem and wanted Bischoff to sign a paper which would guarantee him the amount of money he had been making, in the $6,000 per week range, while the two sides were in negotiations. Apparently he had been given a verbal agreement that would be the case, but was under the impression that unless it was signed, he would be making the same $150 per show that the lowest paid wrestlers in the company made. Those in WCW claimed that what Mero wanted Bischoff to sign was a paper that would guarantee Mero the amount offered to him for its entirety, the rumored 2 years at $300,000-ish, should Mero suffer a serious injury in the ring while the sides were negotiating the new deal. Mero also told Bischoff in the discussion that he had been negotiating with Titan Sports and said he had an offer on the table from them, and apparently said the offer was in some ways a better deal and wanted to know from Bischoff what WCW's future plans were for him. Anyway, Bischoff refused to sign the paper, and one thing led to another, with Bischoff asking Mero to finish up that night after putting Luger over. Mero refused to work the show unless they had a written deal for the night, and reportedly told Bischoff that he hoped he was leaving on good terms after 5 good years with the organization, and Bischoff supposedly told him that he wasn't leaving on good terms at all. As far as WCW was concerned, the situation came out of nowhere, and we haven't heard any word on who will sub for Bad in the continuation of his, lengthy program with Diamond Dallas Page, which included a gimmick match on March 24 at WCW Uncensored, as it was actually Page who interfered in the TV title switch match. Alex Wright, who was originally booked for a dark match on Nitro against Meng, subbed for Bad against Luger on the March 11 Nitro card. Because Mero's contract had expired, there is no waiting period, so he theoretically could join Titan immediately, although he could not use the name Johnny B. Bad because WCW owns the name. There were other problems over the past few weeks between Mero and Bischoff that may have aided in the split. Mero was asked to work in the pit crew for the Steve Grissom race on March 9, which was the same day as his daughter's 8th birthday party. Mero is very well known within WCW circles for being very amenable to public appearances, but asked if they could get someone else to take his place. Bischoff called him the day before and was mad because he made the request to not do it, saying a lot of people have had to miss their kids' birthdays at times to build the company. When Mero finally agreed to go to the race, apparently he was called by Alan Sharp of the WCW office, who told him that Eric didn't want him anywhere near the racetrack. Mero had also asked recently that his angle involving being managed by Kimberly be dropped, blaming his deep religious beliefs and not wanting to be on the road affiliated with another man's wife, even though it was all a role. The original angle was supposedly to be where Kimberly would be with him, then screw him, costing him a match. Not figuratively, things would go back to how they were. However, some felt the chemistry of the two in the ring entrances were strong and they were planning on keeping the two together over the long haul. The recent storyline deal where the two have been having problems was done at Mero's request because he wanted it broken up, citing his religious faith. Bischoff apparently said that he didn't want to be in a situation where every time they booked him in an angle he'd not want to do it if Jesus Christ wouldn't approve of it. Originally the Nasty Boys, rumored to be earning between $210,000 and $250,000 apiece, were given word they were being dropped along with several others to make up for at least some of the salary going to Nash and Hall, since WCW is on something of a budget from the Turner organization when it comes to wrestlers' salaries. The budget almost guarantees two semi-strong promotions as long as business is healthy. As for every big money plum WCW can pick from WWF, they'll have to get rid of wrestlers. A few of them may be able to be marketed by WWF. While we haven't been given any other names of wrestlers cuts officially, other names that have been talked about as those on the bubble or being let go include Shark John Tenta, $250,000, and Bunkhouse Buck. The latter is strange because apparently the angle where he no-shows is because he's either gone temporarily or permanently, and being done I guess as a bizarre game to show that the Brian Pillman situation could be a shoot, even though he shows up on occasion and his name floats into conversation, since Buck's name is also brought up even though he's supposedly also gone from the company. It is believed that with Bad leaving for WWF and the recent acquisition of Vader, WCW wanted to quickly put the kibosh on any public perception that movement was going in both directions rather than one direction. There is also plenty of other talk about wrestlers switching camps. Apparently there had been at least informal dialogue regarding WCW and Sean Waltman, 123 Kid, about bringing him in to work with the likes of Eddie Guerrero. However, that has fallen through since Waltman's WWF contract has rolled over. Other names have been bandied about from WWF as WCW officials have talked of three major players jumping, two of which are Nash and Hall. The situation with the latter two has created some controversy within WCW as well. Figures floating around, and these are all rumored figures, are that Hall's real dollar amount would be in the $350,000 to $450,000 range and Nash's figure would be between $450,000 and $600,000. This has caused the expected unhappiness from some in WCW who perceive themselves as bigger stars and have certainly done more in pro wrestling, aren't making the same money. However, if you look at pro sports in competitive as opposed to monopolistic economic situations in the past, in every situation it ends up with guys who owners are trying to make team or league moves being paid way above what had been the scale for people of their level. Ironically, Hulk Hogan, who is still earning tons more than anyone else in wrestling, has apparently been vocal about the newcomers being paid too much and felt the money would have been better spent on Yokozuna or Ultimate Warrior. Is ECW the next step in the evolution of American wrestling? Or is it simply a violent aberration with a cult following? In recent years there has never been a promotion anywhere in the world that has drawn so much attention while still not proving itself to any serious degree at the box office. The reasons for the attention worldwide is in many ways deserved. ECW has had a tremendous effect on pro wrestling, not only in the United States but also in Mexico. It's become a cult deal that has spread to Japan. Wrestlers in smaller promotions in Japan and in AAA in Mexico routinely wear ECW t-shirts during wild street fight and barbed wire type matches, something other equally brutal and even more bloody promotions from the past, such as Joe Blanchard's San Antonio office with national television exposure, could never even approach. It has exposed numerous new stars and acts that the so-called big boys would never consider and in some cases literally laugh at because of their obvious weaknesses, usually in regard to either size or in some cases wrestling ability, and exposed their strengths and made those same offices come after the guys. It has produced, on a consistent basis, probably the best quality house shows in America. And since the start of the new year, the organization has even proven it could beat the rap of not being able to draw anywhere but in one building, as it has sold out every show, albeit most in very small halls, since the new year began. This past weekend, ECW presented its biggest back-to-back shows in history, entitled The Big Ass Extreme Bash, in the midst of poor weather, selling out to the tune of an estimated 1,200 at both Lost Battalion Hall in Queens, New York on March 8th, and following it up in its home ECW Arena in South Philadelphia the next night. The shows ended with more questions coming up than questions being answered about what exactly is the future of what has to be considered right now the number 3 wrestling promotion in the US. The show in Queens was a study of everything that can go wrong with the concept of presenting a hard-edged, ultraviolent concept on television that encourages fan participation. The next night, the show was an example of nearly everything positive about the same concept. The wrestlers were the same. The angles were similar. The quality of the matches, while overall better in Philadelphia, weren't all that different. The biggest difference was the crowd. In Philadelphia, ECW has become an every 3-week cult deal. The 1,200 or so fans who pack every square centimeter of the building are for the most part, the same fans that have been there for the last few years. In the annals of pro wrestling, that's nothing unusual. In the territorial heyday, every city that ran regularly and had its home arena, whether it be the Atlanta City Auditorium, the Portland Sports Arena, the Kiel in St. Louis, Madison Square Garden, the Cow Palace in San Francisco, the Amphitheater in Chicago, Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, or even the Amarillo Sports Arena would, after repetition, develop fans who were into the product on more than a superficial level. They had their local heroes and homesteaders, and a revolving cast of heels brought in. Some cities liked small guys, some liked big guys, some liked blood, some liked credibility. In most cases, it wasn't so much the nature of the fans themselves, but of what the local promoter himself liked and after a few years, educated the area fans to like as well. Outside of Philadelphia, ECW is a late-night television show on a remote cable station in a few markets. It's wild. It's compelling. And it's creative as hell. When it gets right down to it, the question shouldn't be who it attracts and how they react as much as can it attract enough to make it. A promotion that draws 20,000 fans to a house show that sit on their hands and make no noise or react wrong like cheering heels or even not showing respect for wrestling is still incredibly successful. One that draws 500 on their good nights that react on cue, cheer faces, boo heels, or show appreciation for what they see in other manners is still not successful. Unfortunately, the fans in New York made the former part of the statement more important than the latter. And that's nothing new. Anyone who remembers when ECW toured Florida the first time, and Chris Benoit and 2 Cold Scorpio had a 4 stars plus match before a bunch of disinterested fans in Fort Lauderdale, Florida that were there only for the violence, knows that the New York reaction is nothing new for this promotion. The building was packed by an audience that largely had no respect for the wrestlers but wanted to see guys they had no respect for bust each other up, which is the nice way of putting it, and scantily clad women get their tops ripped off for their highly paid entertainment dollar as the packed little building with $35 ringside and horrible sight lines drew something in the range of a $27,000 house. The crowd came to see stiff chair shots and lots of blood, and not much else. They got a lot of the former and none of the latter. They didn't like most of the faces, exceptions being Sandman, the Gangstas and Bubba Ray Dudley, or most of the heels, or each other for that matter, as some of the most pointed comments and yells from the fans were at other fans. The reaction while Rey Mysterio Jr. and Juventud Guerrera were putting on one of the best technical matches in the history of the city and maybe the entire country was that they wanted the midgets out of there because they figured out they weren't going to bleed. It wasn't everyone in the building that reacted that way, but out of the 1,200, I don't think there were even 200 who actually got into the match, although that minority did give it the respect it deserved. As Mick Foley, a man who has given far more to pro wrestling than it will ever give back to him, had his next to last match ever as Cactus Jack in an arena not too far from where he grew up, he was pelted with loud chants of "You sold out." Less than 90 seconds into a 2 Cold Scorpio vs. Sabu match and the two were trying to exchange holds to build a match. What a novel approach. Since they were going 20 minutes, the boring chants started. As the two went to the finish, a large percentage of the crowd, perhaps more than half, paid them no attention since some strippers from next door were handing out photos. As the Pitbulls and Eliminators went to their finish, in a match which combined lots of missed spots with some incredible and even death-defying spots, like Perry Saturn doing a moonsault off the top rope over the post to the floor, a loud chant of "Show your tits," Francine started, the timing of which couldn't have been more ironic since she'd been out there for 13 minutes and was doing nothing at the time to encourage the chants other than being barely encased in a leather outfit. Actually, that was the main chant of the night, not only at every stripper type brought out to work ringside, but also at any even borderline attractive women in the audience who got up out of her chair and walked around to get a Coke. The crowd itself was probably 98% male, almost all ages 20 to 35. There were less kids than at a UFC show, and the UFC bans kids from attending live. They called Chris Jericho a Hunter Hearst Helmsley wannabe, despite the respective talent of the two. They pelted the ring with so much garbage that at one point the State Athletic Commission ordered the show shut down and Paul Heyman had to use his best crowd psychology to keep the place under control to the point he could put on a main event. Fans sitting near me, who complained all night about no blood and how they were forced to sit through 10 matches without any real stars like the WWF gives them, were also complaining any time someone tried to do any wrestling, saying they could see that wrestling crap at the WWF shows. This was far from the worst wrestling show I've ever seen, and from an effort standpoint, worlds better than almost any WWF and WCW regular house shows. From a work and execution standpoint, it was nowhere close to what WWF and WCW provide at a standard house show. In some ways, ECW Live was the opposite of the defunct SMW group. SMW relied on old tricks and psychology, and the guys worked hard but took advantage of every psychological shortcut. The best analogy came from Sandman, who said that since the crowds down there were so easy, that guys learned the shortcuts and started coasting. SMW featured veterans who largely knew what they were doing. There were never, or at least rarely, spots in the match where the guys got lost and you'd want to groan, although nobody was regularly risking their bodies like they did in places like Mexico and Japan to elevate the style. If anything, that was the last thing Jim Cornette wanted. ECW matches have the guys take unbelievable risks, but they get lost in the matches and there are a lot of miscues. For pure working ability, SMW was tons better than ECW. For work rate, there is no comparison as well, with ECW having the edge. The Big Ass Bash in New York was a depressing night, among the most depressing nights I've ever spent watching pro wrestling. The creation of the Mad Scientist, combined with numerous other forces such as freezing weather, bad sight lines, and just living in New York, led to an audience with no respect for the incredible amount of work he and his company put into the show. It was an audience that was the reality of the worst John McCain fantasy about what violence and UFC are supposedly to be about. The Mad Scientist himself was quick to acknowledge it and take the blame. At a team meeting the next night, Paul Heyman said the show sucked and took the blame himself, saying he tried to give people something they didn't want to see, and the next time he'd give them what they came for. However, for a group whose logo is its initials wrapped in bloody barbed wire, a group that regularly uses props like a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, and whose fans have been encouraged to hand wrestlers everything including the kitchen sink, there were items as bizarre as hockey sticks confiscated from fans as they entered the building. Running a show in front of a strict commission with a self-imposed blood ban, it's going to be very hard to give that audience what it came to see. Was this crowd a product of New York City, or of the television, or of the building, or the bad weather? The only similarity between the ECW arena the next night, the Bingo Hall, which is the home base for ECW, and the Lost Battalion Hall were that it was largely the same group of wrestlers and a similar work rate, and that both small arenas were crammed full of people. In Philadelphia, Foley got a thunderous and amazingly respectful standing ovation prior to and after his last match under the ring name Cactus Jack before joining the WWF as Mankind the next evening in Corpus Christi. His post-match speech in his last night under the gimmick was among the best things I've ever seen at a house show. Mysterio Jr. and Guerrera, spurred on by the crowd, had one of the greatest matches ever in the building. Everyone who was a regular was over with their gimmick. The crowd, while wanting blood, for the most didn't let the lack of it damper their enjoyment of the show. As Heyman said before the show in the same speech, "This is our home base fans and we know what they want and we're going to give it to them." And they did. They made them laugh. They made them cry, well, almost. They made them happy and made them sad. It wasn't flawless, and the crowd was quick to pick up on every flaw, particularly if it came from a newcomer not a part of their team. They chanted "Don't come back" at Rick Bogner. Bogner, a Canadian who was a major star in FMW before jumping to War, whose ring name, Big Titan, is a heat getter and in its own way, after he worked a sometimes spectacular and other times clumsy match with Sable. Fans loudly chanted UF, ed up at missed spots throughout the show, a few of which appeared to have been missed on purpose by wrestlers to get that reaction, and chanted to end a prelim match which was obviously put there to be the backdrop of an angle. To the credit of those running the company and those working for the company, the dressing room was more motivated with the idea of putting on a great show for the fans than any in the world. From top to bottom, I've never seen a crew work as hard and take as many risks, and that's from someone who regularly sees AAA live. That has its downside as well. Post-match looked more like the triage room in a hospital after a gang rumble than after a sporting event. Because they only work a few shows a month and are generally younger, they can survive taking more risks than the guys with the big paychecks can get away with or would want to get away with. The concept of playing with pain is taken to a level of borderline insanity when Scott Levy, Raven, worked 2 matches even though he needed crutches to get around because of contracting gout. The injury rate looks ridiculous to people brought up on the concept of pro wrestling being that you may it look like you're hurting people without anyone actually getting seriously hurt. Hack Myers suffered a 4th-degree shoulder separation. Tommy Dreamer's body is falling apart from the brutality. Sandman took chair shots so stiff from the headhunters that he couldn't remember anything about his match later that night. JT Smith's hand was a mess when Axl Rotten threw a heavy fire extinguisher on it. One of the job guys, Joel Hartgood, named after a former promoter, had a nasty black eye when Sandman gave him a vicious cane shot that missed the forehead. The byproduct of working before a crowd that doesn't accept anything but the stiffest chair and cane shots to the head is a lot of scrambled brain cells. But the show was very good, and excellent to the point of being off the charts in certain spots. In other spots it was maybe a little long, there were too many matches and too many angles. When the average fan can't remember the next morning running down the show all the angles, then it's a lot that they didn't all get across. It dragged in spots. But it could stand up to everything but the very best any major promotion in the world could produce, even though by and large it has a less experienced crew who make up a lot of shortcomings in regard to skill and experience with enthusiasm and insanity. The angles were great for the audience. There are still the catch-22s. Seeing the show live, because of the makeup of the audience, all the swearing wasn't a problem at all. Nobody live gets offended. The constant insulting of WCW was sometimes funny, such as New Jack saying that when he was in jail it was such an unbearable experience because they forced him to watch WCW on television, or Cactus Jack saying that leaving this building is going to hurt me as much as it did when I had to sue my Uncle Eric, or Shane Douglas ripping a t-shirt off a la Hogan, mentioning him by name and saying that was an easy as shit, but also overdone at times. In New York, Douglas got booed by a lot of fans, although not the majority, when he insulted other promotions, and in particular when he opened by saying Shawn Michaels, "Kiss my ass." The swearing, violence and beating up of women, the most controversial aspects of the promotion, seem fine as a performance to the audience it is designed at in Philadelphia. However, the same stuff airing on television is a problem on many levels. It causes most self-respecting television stations to steer clear of the show, even though it's often the most entertaining hour of wrestling in the country. It causes most self-respecting wrestling fans to be turned off of attending live by the hard-edged and apparently violent live crowd, while turning on a small segment that is they're expecting to see things that are dangerous and now, in the case of blood, that they can no longer deliver, although they do deliver on most everything else they tease. The other side of the coin is that if they presented wrestling with no shock value, because the names are newer and because wrestling is overexposed for free already, they'd have a hard time going anywhere either. The ECW arena audience is unique and loves the violence, but still didn't seem dangerous, even when super heel Bill Alfonso or Brian Pillman were doing their things. New York was a throwback to the old days of heels, well, those two heels, getting heat and fans wanting to throw things and jump them, but with the lack of security, even in a building where alcohol was banned, the crowd nearly got the show stopped. Showing the same stuff on television to people who haven't been attending matches every 3 weeks for the past 2 years creates an audience that is completely different from Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a relatively controlled and at least largely, not totally, respectful audience of the performers that appear on television to be totally out of control. The perception from watching television of the danger of going to the ECW arena is exaggerated, however the perception becomes the reality in new markets. New market fans will believe when they attend they have the right to be totally out of control as well, except in many cases they will lack the respect for the performers and have no respect for other fans. The result in those instances is a horribly reacting and borderline dangerous audience. Results from Queens, New York were 1. Kendo Nagasaki, in because Big Japan Pro Wrestling and ECW are apparently going to do talent booking deals, and Christopher Michaels beat Damian Stone, James Stone from UWFI, and Joel Hartgood in 131 when Michaels pinned Storm. Nagasaki, who wasn't advertised, got a huge face pop, not because fans were aware of Japanese wrestling, but the buzz was around the crowd that this was the guy who feuded with Dusty Rhodes in Florida, when Florida wrestling was on TV in New York. Geez, that was 1982. Nagasaki destroyed both opponents and his partner with totally brutal chair shots, then walked out leaving his partner against both. His partner still ended up winning in 131 when he power-slammed Stone. Sandman then came out to the biggest pop of the night throwing brutal cane shots, all 3 wrestlers left in the ring and the referee. Hartgood took the shot in the eye and his eye looked like hell within seconds. 1 star. 2. JT Smith beat Hack Myers in 247 when Axl Rotten interfered attacking Smith. Smith, who does a silly but hilarious Italian heel gimmick even though he's black, then made a comeback on Rotten and was on the top rope when Myers hit him with a chair. 1/2 of 1 star. Douglas came out for an interview saying that Vince McMahon can't touch this and said he was in purgatory for 6 months and ripped on Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, 1-2-3 Kid, etc. Brian Pillman was at ringside as a spectator and started going nuts. Pillman brought up how Douglas quit WCW, quit WWF, quit the Dynamic Dudes and quit everything and said that a real man doesn't quit, a real man gets fired. Douglas threatened to punch Pillman when he counted to 3, but Pillman pulled a very young child, a child actor, in front of him and Douglas went to punch the kid but stopped just short as the kid freaked out. The security ended up dragging Pillman out of the building, but not before fans started swinging chairs, and Pillman wound up getting punched by fans on the way out. Douglas was booed a decent amount as well. Then Todd Gordon came out and Bill Alfonso followed. Alfonso slapped Gordon. Fans started throwing things and Joey Styles was getting pelted. Taz came out and Alfonso hit Gordon with a chair and started beating on him. Bam Bam Bigelow then came out and Taz hit him with a chair but Bigelow didn't sell it and Taz and Alfonso left. Fans chanted LT and LT sucks at Bigelow. They also made ambulance noises, which was pretty funny, as the medical personnel tried to help Gordon up. At this point it was already 9:05 p.m. and we'd seen 4 minutes of wrestling. 3. Chris Jericho pinned Cactus Jack in 13:55 with a German suplex. Jack was announced as being from Stamford, Connecticut and being known to all as Mankind. Stevie Richards, who is phenomenal on interviews, and Blue Meanie, who is also a riot, who are known as the Fabulous Ones and do a gimmick where they pretend they drew big houses in Memphis with Richards sometimes calling Meanie Stan and of course Meanie calls Richards Steve came out and Cactus said that since he's going to WWF, he asked if he could be a third member of the Fabulous Ones and do the Fargo strut and all 3 did the strut. Match had good psychology in theory but the crowd didn't get into it which hurt the match. Mikey Whipwreck came to ringside at the finish. After the match, Jack grabbed the mic to booing and you sold out chants and said to the fans that when he was growing up, his dad took him to Madison Square Garden and told him maybe when he grew up he could wrestle there and he told his dad he'd rather wrestle for a bunch of idiot morons at Lost Battalion Hall. He then said that all the people giving him the finger would worship him when he goes to WrestleMania. He asked for a 10-bell salute to signal the end of his career as Cactus Jack while fans chanted asshole at him and a few fans clapped respectfully. 2 3/4 stars. 4. Taz pinned Mikey Whipwreck in 4:12 with a head and arm suplex and Taz mission, basically a choke finish. This was very good while it lasted, with at one point Taz giving Whipwreck an over-the-head belly-to-belly over the top rope to floor. This also had good psychology in the spots that was totally lost on the crowd. After the match Taz wouldn't break the hold and Bigelow came out. As Alfonso distracted Bigelow, Taz clipped him and choked him out while Alfonso hit the ref and several jobbers with chair shots as they tried to break it up. 2.5 stars. 5. Eliminators beat Pit Bulls in 14:06 to keep the ECW tag titles. These guys worked like crazy and did lots of great spots but missed a lot of spots as well. The Eliminators have a lot of potential and can do great athletic maneuvers but need experience. Pitbull number 2 is in the same boat. At one point he went for a spin kick into the corner and sailed so far over the head of the guy he was kicking that he went over the top rope and wiped out a cameraman. In edited form, it'll look like a 4-star match. They wound up pinning Pitbull number 2 with the total elimination after numerous false finishes. 2 3/4 stars. 6. Juventud Guerrero won 2 out of 3 falls from Rey Mysterio Jr. in 16:26. Nobody reacted to Guerrero while Mysterio coming out only got polite applause. As they were doing amazing spots, a chant started of "We want mascaras." Great moves and no pops as Mysterio Jr. won the first fall with a Japanese Ocean Cyclone suplex which may have been a first for that move in the United States. As Guerrero threw great chops, the place was yelling "Who?" in reference to Flair. Mysterio Jr. did an Arabian moonsault to the floor and they traded chair shots. Lots of great near falls before Guerrero used the Dragon suplex for the second fall. Guerrero did more hot moves including a springboard leg lariat for a near fall which got no reaction, a springboard drop kick from the top rope onto Mysterio Jr. on the apron followed by a Liger flip dive. He tried a springboard Frankensteiner but Mysterio power bombed him. Mysterio did a springboard somersault top A to the floor. All kinds of great near falls. Guerrero used a brainbuster for a near fall. Mysterio kicked out but the ref counted 3 anyway which was a bad finish. Guerrero signaled for the match to continue because it wasn't supposed to be the finish and the ref after about a minute recognized his mistake and restarted it, but it killed the finish. The two brawled stiff to no reaction, and finally Guerrero used a brainbuster while standing on the top rope for the pin. 4 1/4 stars. 7. Big Titan pinned Dread in 3:42 with a power bomb. Fans were chanting "end this match" within 70 seconds. They gave them no chance, but it was a horrible match. -1/4 of 1 star. 8.
Scorpio went to a 20-minute draw with Sable to keep the TV title.
This also had some death-defying moves by Sable and some great top rope moves by Scorpio, but in between it was pretty weak.
There were bullshit and boring chants early as they tried to wrestle.
Sable did a flip plancha and then put a chair midway in the ring, ran across, leapt off the chair to the top rope where he did a springboard dive several rows deep into the crowd.
No psychology and tons of missed spots as well.
Sable did a plancha into a Frankensteiner on the floor. At another point, Sable leapt off a chair with a Frankensteiner on Scorpio outside the ring and through a table which looked dangerous as hell. At one point, strippers were passing around cards and nobody paid attention to the wrestlers. At another point, there was a fight in the stands and nobody watched the wrestlers. Although I didn't see this, I believe at another point a woman in the stands finally paid attention to the "show your tits" chants and she was carted off. The intense finish never took place because the crowd had been killed and had killed the match past the point of no return. Sable teased jumping through a table after the match, but then walked off and the fans booed him as he left. 1.5 star. 9. Dances with Dudley and Bubba Ray. Dudley beat Headhunters in 2:36 when Bubba Schoolboy beat Bubba got a great reaction. Dud. After the match, the Gangstas did a run-in to a tremendous reception. The fans went nuts and started just pelting the ring and ringside area with garbage.
They kept the Gangstas music during the entire run-in, which was a 4-minute brawl with all kinds of objects.
It was a real wild scene. The commission wanted the show shut down at this point because the crowd was out of control.
Paul Heyman came out, slipping on the wet floor from all the garbage thrown, and said that the commission wanted the show stopped and not to throw things.
People started booing him when a group out of Philadelphia started chanting "don't throw things," which turned the crowd with him. He said that what if Sandman, about the only guy on the show they seemed to really like, were to slip and get hurt and not be able to wrestle because you threw so many things, and told the crowd they have to be able to police themselves. He used great psychology in the speech. After the crowd was calmed down, he said that they had broken the 11 p.m. curfew. It was about 11:30 at this point, and the commission wants the show shut down and basically whipped the crowd into a frenzy again, saying that they want us to all go home, but we're going to give you a main event and F the commission and all that. 10. Raven, who couldn't walk, retained his title beating Sandman in 12:27. Basically, this match consisted of Sandman getting hit with constant outside interference from Cactus, Richards and Meanie, and always kicking out. In addition, Missy Hyde and Kimona Wanalea did their cat fight spots.
Douglas hit Raven with a chair and put Sandman on top, Meanie hit Sandman with a chair and put Raven on top, etc. It was actually pretty good considering that Raven couldn't walk. But the finish was a mess as Raven DDT'd Sandman on a guardrail brought into the ring, but the move missed badly. 1.5 star. As for Philadelphia, before the show started, the Gangstas came out. A fan, actually New Jack's wife, who I guess will be the next female character involved, came out and tried to jump on New Jack and security carried her out. New Jack motioned that he wanted her back and led the crowd in chanting "bring her back" to establish himself as a total face. New Jack did a total babyface rap talking about how he was in jail for 6 weeks, more like 6 days, and told a funny story about how a guy owed him money and he put him in the trunk of his car and forgot he never let him out, and the next thing he knew he was in jail. That's not exactly what happened. He said while in jail he missed all the sick people in Philadelphia. He said jail was like torture because they forced him to watch WCW on television and then ran down WWF and WCW. Damian Kane, who managed the Headhunters who all attacked Mustafa on the card when New Jack missed the show because he was in jail, came out and asked to manage the Gangstas for the match against Scorpio and Sandman later in the show. New Jack brought up how Jim Cornette wanted to do the same thing and then wanted to F him with a tennis racket, to which Joey Styles said something about a banana. He said he told Cornette to suck his nuts. Kane said that he knew New Jack hadn't seen any pussy in 6 weeks because he was in prison and basically offered him Lady Alexandra, another valet, and New Jack started thinking about it but eventually punched Kane, and this wound up with the main event being changed to a 3-way dance match which got a huge pop. 1. Smith pinned Rotten in 650 with a low blow using his feet on the ropes. Rotten used a fire extinguisher. Smith's hand was screwed up which led to him missing a few spots. 1.5 star. 2. Stone at El Puerto Ricano went to a no contest with Bad Crew in 148. Pillman ran in and attacked all four to end the match. Dud. Pillman started doing an interview. Douglas was on stage and tried to say it was a WCW wrestler trying to ruin ECW. Pillman challenged Douglas to a fight. Douglas came down and Pillman left.
Douglas ripped his t-shirt and made fun of Hogan. He then threw his t-shirt to the crowd and a fan threw it back.
Douglas got PO'd and challenged the fan to fight, similar to a situation at the last show.
Douglas was pretty good on the mic, but if they took the phrase piece of shit out of his vocabulary, he couldn't do a sentence. 3.
Eliminators kept the tag titles, beating Bubba Ray Dudley and Hack Myers.
Eliminators knocked Chubby Dudley and Sign Guy Dudley off the apron. Big Dick Dudley wanted to join Bubba in the match, but he was dragged off because of his bad knee. Sign Guy, who was supposedly a mute, wrote a sign that said help and was waving it, and the Eliminators gave him the total elimination.
Finally Myers came in, but he was legit hurt quickly, so Bubba had to work the match himself.
Myers, in great pain, tagged in to get totally eliminated for the pin in 8:15. 1.5 star. 4. Jericho beat Taz via DQ in 6 minutes. This was a hot match.
At one point Taz used the head and arm suplex and the ref stopped the match, ruling Jericho unable to continue.
Jericho begged to restart the match, which they did. Taz used a German suplex and Taz mission and apparently won, but I guess refused to break the hold because they said Jericho won via DQ.
3.5 stars.
Taz wouldn't break the hold and they ran guys in to get destroyed.
Pillman then ran in and started stomping the fallen guys that Taz had destroyed. Douglas came out and Pillman ran away into the arms of Harry Boson, a lineman on the Philadelphia Eagles.
Douglas did another interview and started challenging the same fan to fight in a segment that went way too long. The ring broke during the previous match and they had about a 40-minute delay in getting it fixed.
After the delay, Heyman started yelling at the ring crew about how long it took them to fix the ring, and Sandman came out and caned the ring crew members very hard.
I guess everyone wants to be in showbiz. 5. Mysterio Jr. won 2 out of 3 falls from Guerrera in 15:57.
In the first fall, Mysterio did a springboard moonsault to the floor and Guerrera did a springboard somersault dropkick from the apron inside the ring.
Guerrera took the fall with a dragon suplex.
Mysterio Jr. did a Hurricane Rana off the top rope onto Guerrera on the apron that was amazing, and a Liger dive off the referee's back to the floor. He finally used a Dr. Bomb for the fall. Third fall saw Guerrera do an Osai moonsault, a springboard leg lariat from the apron into the ring. Mysterio did a springboard somersault plancha to the floor. They went outside and traded chair shots. Guerrera power-bombed Mysterio in the snow off a car, and Mysterio gave Guerrera a Frankensteiner off a car onto the parking lot snow. After tons of near falls, Guerrera went for a die-hard Flash Mountain while standing on the middle rope, but on the way down Mysterio Jr. turned it into a Frankensteiner for the pin. 4.75 stars. 6. Cactus Jack, in his last match, pinned Whipwreck in 17:18. Jack said that Whipwreck will someday be able to tell his grandchildren that he had Cactus Jack's last match, but he'll be damned if Whipwreck will be able to tell them that he beat Cactus Jack in his last match. Jack got a thunderous ovation and Whipwreck was heavily booed. Jack pulled out all his spots from the beginning. He suplexed Whipwreck onto a vertical table. He did the hip-busting elbow off the second rope to the floor. Whipwreck did a springboard flip dive into the third row. Tons of brutal chair shots. After 3 chair shots, Jack got the pin with a piledriver on a chair. Jack gave a hilarious and somewhat moving speech after the match, saying he wanted to thank the 2 men who make ECW what it is, the creative genius behind the promotion and the man whose vision it was that created the promotion, teasing Heyman and Gordon, and then called for Richards and Meanie to come out. They played New York over the PA, and the 3 did their high-stepping dance routine to the song and a fabulous one strut out of the building. 4 stars. 7. Pit Bulls and Bruise Brothers went to a no contest in 16:58. Lots of brawling with some good spots and missed spots. It wound up with Richards, Meanie and Tommy Dreamer all involved. Dreamer pulled his arm out of the sling and started punching the Bruise Brothers with it when it looked like he was cornered. Dreamer destroyed Meanie. 2 stars. 8. Sabu pinned Titan with the Arabian Facebuster in 12:18. Typical collection of awesome spots and badly missed spots on each man's part. Fans didn't like Titan. He looked bad at times but did great stuff at other times. Titan did a plancha, and later tried a second, but Sabu moved and he went through a table. 2 stars. 9. Raven pinned Douglas in 8:40 with a DDT on a chair to keep the ECW title. This was an amazing performance by both, considering Raven's limitations since he shouldn't have been in the ring. Lots of outside interference by Meanie and Richards leading to near falls, which Douglas kicked out of. At another point, Juanalia saved Raven for a pin, after which Douglas pulled up her dress and spanked her, and naturally she liked it and began bobbing her butt in a seductive manner, and Douglas got distracted and practically started making out with her before Raven jumped him. After the match, the Bruise brothers attacked Douglas and went to ram his groin into the post, but Dreamer made the save. They then went to do the same to Dreamer, but Sandman made the save. 3¼ stars. 10. Gangstas won the three-way dance in 1422 over Headhunters and Scorpio and Sandman. They brawled all over the place with brutal chair and cane and other weapon shots. It was stiff enough that Sandman was knocked silly by a chair shots, and took numerous others after that point, and Hunters took cane shots so hard they had lumps on their noggin as well. Scorpio did a plancha into the third row at one point onto. Scorpio pinned Hunter B in 9:51 with a Scorpio splash. Hunters and Sandman brawled to the back after the match, leaving Scorpio alone with both Gangstas, and New Jack ended up pinning Scorpio to win the match with a splash off the top rope. 3¼ stars. AAA wrestler Pentagon, real name Jesus Salas, was clinically dead for 3 minutes late March 6 after suffering total respiratory failure from mixing alcohol and drugs. The incident occurred in the ring at a television taping in Aguascalientes earlier that night, eerily similar to the Shawn Michaels angle. Pentagon was in the main event, an 8-man tag match teaming with Fishman and Psicosis and Cibernetico against Conan and La Parca and Octagon and Ultimo Dragon, the latter making his AAA debut. After taking a backdrop, he lied motionless in the ring and didn't respond when the other wrestlers called to him to see if he was okay. An ambulance was immediately called, and the doctors later said that the only thing that saved his life was that the arena and the hospital were only a few minutes away, and that the ambulance arrived to the arena so quickly and he was given mouth-to-mouth. His entire respiratory system had shut down by the time he made it to the hospital, and his brain was being deprived of oxygen. After he was revived, there was still fear he would be totally paralyzed, as he had no movement for 2 hours, and it wasn't until 5 hours later that the doctors felt he would eventually have a total recovery. He's expected back in the ring in about 2 months. Salas, 39, is an 18-year pro from Torreon, Coahuila, who spent most of his career under the name Espanto Jr. He is from a large wrestling family, and his father and many other younger brothers are all wrestlers, 3 of whom wrestled as a babyface undercard trio called Las Gemas, Zafiro and Brilliant and Diamante. Under the Espanto name, his father was the original El Espanto, who held the Mexican Light Heavyweight Championship in the late 50s. He was a well-respected undercard heel who was a great worker but somewhat lacked in charisma, and was generally considered as among the most underutilized wrestlers in all of Mexico and perhaps even the world. Similar to a Shiro Koshinaka of a few years ago, or maybe a Mexican version of Terry Taylor. In the 1980s, when size was more of a factor in Mexico in as far as placement of a wrestler on the card, he was a well-respected prelim wrestler who was El Hijo del Santo's prime rival for the UWA lightweight title in the late 1980s, and later in 1992 beat Santo for the UWA welterweight title in 1992. After dropping that belt to Celestial, he jumped from UWA to AAA in the summer of 1992 and continued in basically the same spot as a solid working mid-card wrestler, but with no major push, and was somewhat lost in the shuffle with all the talent that was in AAA. His major career break came late in 1994 when AAA booker Antonio Pena changed his ring name to El Santo Negro, billed as being from El Salvador, and programmed as the arch-rival of Santo. The Santo Negro feud drew tremendous heat almost immediately because of the heat of a foreign heel using the Santo name, and by the summer, the feud had resulted in El Hijo del Santo's popularity getting something of a rebirth and Santo Negro being among the hottest heels in the world. However, he had to give up the gimmick due to a lawsuit against Pena and AAA from other members of the Santo family who didn't like the legend of El Santo to be capitalized on in that manner. The family heat probably was a major factor in Santo leaving AAA for EMLL, and resulted in Pena changing Salas' gimmick to Pentagon, and turned into the arch-rival of Octagon, the group's other lighter-weight babyface kid's hero type. While that feud garnered some steam, it never caught fire as the first feud did, and Pentagon has largely been just another heel for the past several months. In a largely bad taste follow-up, 2 nights later at the EMLL television taping, during a trios match, Brasso de Plata did another of his numerous fake heart attack angles, playing off the fact he himself has had at least one and maybe more legit heart attacks, so he does worked heart attacks fairly often, where he acts as if he is near death's door. Ric Flair was arrested on 1:35 a.m. late March 7 in regard to being a passenger in a DWI. Flair, 47, was charged with aiding and abetting a DWI, since the driver of the car was under the legal drinking age of 21 and had a blood alcohol level of 0.15, about twice the legal limit. The woman, Colette McCune, 20, was a friend of his wife's and was driving Flair and his car home from a nightclub where Flair had been drinking and was in no condition to drive himself home. The car allegedly committed a traffic violation which caused the police to pull it over. Flair claimed to police that he didn't realize McCune was legally drunk when he got her to drive him home. Because of Flair's celebrity status, the incident was all over the media in the Charlotte and Greensboro area the next day and within a few days had gone national in some quarters. What Flair is being charged with carries a minimum $100 fine and for a first-time offender, a prison term from 1 to 60 days, which is usually suspended on the first offense and turned into community service work. Flair actually brought this up in a pre-show interview at the Nitro show on March 11th in Winston-Salem, saying something to the effect of, "Can you believe they put the Nature Boy in jail this week?" Kevin Sullivan then said that it wasn't Ric Flair with a 20-year-old girl, it was ring announcer Dave Penzer with a 12-year-old girl. This is the third issue of the current 4-issue set. If you've got A1 on your address label, it means that your Observer subscription expires next week. Renewal rates within the United States, Canada, and Mexico remain $8 for 4 issues, which includes $3 for postage and handling, $15 for 8, $22 for 12, $28 for 16, $42 for 24, $56 for 32 up through $70 for 40 issues. Rates for the rest of the world with the exception of the United Kingdom are $11 for 4 issues, which includes $6 for postage and handling, $21 for 8, $30 for 12, $50 for 20, $70 for 28 up through $100 for 40 issues. All subscription renewals except within the United Kingdom should be sent to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. All letters to the editor, reports from live shows and any other correspondence pertaining to this newsletter should also be sent to the above address, including by those within the UK. Readers within the UK for fastest delivery should renew at Wrestling Observer Newsletter, 19 Alpha Road, Woolwich, Chepstow Gwen NP65QX, South Wales, United Kingdom. Subscription rates in pounds are 7.50 for 4, 15 for 8, 22.50 for 12 and 30 for 16. Please make checks out to Shoot Fabe rather than Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Fax messages can be sent to the Observer 24 hours a day at 408-244-3402. Phone messages can be left 24 hours a day at 408-244-2455. For the most up-to-date wrestling information, I can be reached every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Wrestling Observer hotline 900-903-9030/99 cents per minute. Children under 18 need parents' permission before calling, with a recorded news update. Besides myself, reports are done by Mike Mooneyham Monday, Steve Beverly Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Scott Hudson Tuesday, Thursday, Ron Lemieux Wednesday, Sunday, Bruce Mitchell Thursday, Saturday, and Georgianne Macrobolis Sunday. Major events wrestling calendar March 15th to April 15th. March 15th FMW Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center, Matsunaga vs. Pogo. March 16th WWF Landover, MD US Air Arena. March 17th WWF New York Madison Square Garden, Bret Hart and Undertaker vs. Michaels and Diesel. March 18th WCW Monday Nitro tapings Chattanooga, Tennessee Arena. March 20th New Japan Nagoya Aichi Gymnasium, Hashimoto and Hirata vs. Harlem Heat. March 23rd UWFI New Japan Sendai Miyagi Sports Center, Takata and Sano vs. Koshinaka and Ohara. March 24th WCW Uncensored Pay-Per-View Tupelo, Mississippi Coliseum, Hogan vs. Flair and Anderson and Sullivan and Luger. March 25th WCW Monday Nitro tapings Huntsville, Alabama Von Braun Center, Flair vs. Giant. March 25th Rings Niigata, Yamamoto vs. Terriol. March 26th New Japan Tokyo Gymnasium, One Night Tag Team Tournament. March 30th WCW Philadelphia ECW Arena. March 31st WWF WrestleMania 12 Pay-Per-View Anaheim, California Arrowhead Pond, Bret Hart vs. Michaels. March 31st All Japan Women Yokohama Arena, Toyota vs. Kyoko Inoue. April 1st WWF Monday Night Raw taping San Bernardino, California Orange Pavilion. April 1st WCW Monday Nitro taping Cleveland State University Convocation Center. April 2nd WWF Superstars taping San Diego Sports Arena. April 3rd IWA Nagoya Severn vs. Goto. April 7th JWP Yokohama Bunka Gum, Kansai and Takako Inoue vs. Ozaki and Kyoko Inoue. April 13th Pancrase Pay-Per-View, taped January 28th Yokohama Bunka Gym Suzuki vs. Frank Shamrock. April 15th WCW Monday Nitro taping Charleston, West Virginia. Results: February 25th Fluvanna, Virginia, Ultimate Championship Wrestling, 291, California Kid 1 Battle Royal, Swede Stone v Carolina Kid, Dave Knight v John Masters, Latin Lover v Stars, Rock and Roll Express Original v Death and Destruction, Wrestling Clown v Mr. Big Stuff, American Patriot v Vladimir Koloff, RC Lovin v Kevin Dalton. February 29th Indianapolis Circle City Wrestling, Sean V. B. Judge Dredd,
Vic the Bruiser be Sarge, Sabu be Dave the Rave, Mike Samples and Flash Flanagan be Rip Rogers and Tracy Smothers. March 1st Nessa Walcoyote, AAA 2200 Gallego and Rocky Santana and Bronco be Angel Mortal and Mr. Condor and Marabunta, Fishman and Jerry Estrada and Angel Blanco Jr. be Heavy Metal and Torero and Winners, Conan Cian Cars and Pero Aguayo be Cybernetico and Pierroth Jr. and Killer /. March 1st Bedford, Kentucky, Ohio Valley Wrestling, Danny Davis be Phantom Tragedy, Flash Flanagan be Phantom Sorrow, Sean V be Knuckles Dragon, Vic the Bruiser be Flame, Rip Rogers be Mike Samples. March 1st Clear Spring, MD, National Wrestling League, 400, Switchblade be Morgus the Maniac, Little Louie be Sleazy, Johnny Gunn be Corporal Punishment, Neil Superior be Shane Shadows, Julio Sanchez 1 Battle Royal, Bam Bam Bigelow be Boo Bradley. March 1st McMinnville TN, Hardcore Championship Wrestling, 133, Strictly Business be Larry Valentine and TNT, Tony Falk be Kroll the Deathstalker, Tracy Smothers Corrado Von Bronner, Troy Eaton be Prozac Jack, Von Bronner 1 Rumble. March 2nd Brookhaven, Mississippi, Indiana, 600, Cedric Payne be Jim Brony, Tarzan Kid be Master of Terror, Skull Crusher be Wild Thing, Ken Massey be Cassidy Raleigh, Tommy Rogers be Lord Humongous, Gary Nations, DQ. March 2nd Kaiser, West Virginia, National Wrestling League, 550, Morgus the Maniac be Switchblade, Little Louie be Sleazy, Johnny Gunn be Corporal Punishment, Neil Superior be Shane Shadows, Adrian Hall 1 Battle Royal, Bam Bam Bigelow be Boo Bradley. March 2nd Simpsonville, Kentucky, Ohio Valley Wrestling, Flash Flanagan be Knuckles Dragon, Vic the Bruiser be Flame, Sean V be Phantom Sorrow, Mike Samples and Danny Davis be Galaxians. March 2nd Tampa, Florida Wrestling Council, Death Metal be Hallard Rathbone, Johnny Favorite be David Palmer, Sasquatch be Iron Man Stinger and Navy SEAL NC Chris Nelson and Buddy Valentine, Nasty Nina be Dominique Jasmine, Freedom Rider be Stormy Weather, Garbage Man be Storm Trooper, Rick Thames and Sonny T DDQ Ayala Brothers. March 2nd Houma, Louisiana, Mid-South Wrestling, 200 TJ Sullivan be Mustang Mike, Hellraiser be Half-Breed, Frankie Jeffrey be Shogun Warrior, Joe Kane be High Voltage, Bronco Bob be Sandman not original, Tommy Rich be Al Savage, Southern Patriots be Taz not original, and Crazy Joe. March 3rd Gretna, Louisiana, Cajun Wrestling Federation, 320, Joe Kane be Devil, Al Savage be Clown, Davey Rich be Carl Fergie Core, Johnny Roseker Kevin Northcutt, Boris Yukov DDQ Tommy Rich. March 3rd Jeffersonville, Indiana, Ohio Valley Wrestling, Mike Samples be Medic, Flash Flanagan be Phantom Tragedy, Sean V be Knuckles Dragon, Bill Dundee and Danny Davis be Rip Rogers and Vic the Bruiser. March 3rd Martinsburg, West Virginia, Wild Organization of Wrestling, 250, Jimmy G be Brian Anthony, Fantasia be Dangerous DD, Widowmaker and Satanic Warriors and Private Payne be Morgus the Maniac and Bob Starr and Big Dog Mac and Sheik Abdul, Johnny Gunn be Corporal Punishment, Jimmy Janetti be Doink the Clown, Morgus 1 Battle Royal, Tommy Haw be Mr. Haito. March 4th Providence, Rhode Island, WWF, 6453, Godwins be Body Donna's 2 stars, Ringmaster be Marty Jannetty 1 1/2 star, Ahmed Johnson be Tatanka Dud, Shawn Michaels be Owen Hart 3 1/2 stars, Bret Hart be Davey Boy Smith 3 stars, 123 Kid be Bob Holly Dud, Duke Drosy be Hunter Hurst Helmsley Dud, IC title, Buldust be Savio Vega 3 3/4 stars, WWF title Lumberjack match, Bret Hart be Michaels 4 stars. March 4th Memphis, USWA, 1000, One Night Tourney for Unified Title, Jesse James Armstrong be Tracy Smothers, Giant Warrior be King Cobra, Spellbinder be Reggie be Fine, Jerry Lawler d Brian Christopher, Lawler advanced via coin flip, Mabel be Mo refused to wrestle, Spellbinder be Isaac Yankem DQ, Warrior be Spellbinder, Mabel be Armstrong, Lawler be Warrior, Lawler be Mabel DQ to win tournament and title, USWA Tag Title loser leaves town, Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert be PG-13. March 4th Ishikawa Michinoku Pro 2856 sellout, Shiryubi Masato Yakashiji Men's Taubi Naohiro Hoshikawa, Yone Jinjinker Wellington Wilkins Jr., Dick Togobi Grand Naniwa, Tiger Mask and Grand Hamada and Great Sasuke Super Delphin and Taka Michinoku and Shoichi Funaki. March 4th Isazaki Tokyo Pro Wrestling, Bloody Bruise BB Segunda No. 1, Masanobu Kurisu be Apollo Sugawara, Bloody Bruise be Akihiko Masuda, Kishin Kawabata be Toryu Masuda 1 Battle Royal, Garuda and Gecko and Bloody Bruiser B Great Kabuki and Daiko Kubo Benkei and Masuda. Mr. Pogo and Masashi Aoyagi B Takashi Ishikawa and Shigeo Okamura. March 4th Louisville, Kentucky, Ohio Valley Wrestling, Sean V.B. Knuckles Dragon, Flash Flanagan B. Flame, Sarge and Maniac B. Phantoms, Mike Samples B. Medic, Danny Davis and Bill Dundee B. Rip Rogers and Vic the Bruiser. March 5th Austin, Texas, WWF, 4023, Godwins B. Body Donnas 2 stars, Justin Bradshaw B. Bob Holly 2 stars, Ringmaster B. Barry Horowitz 2.5 stars, Duke Drosy B. Hunter Hurst Helmsley 2 stars, Yokozuna B. Davy Boy Smith 1 star, Jake Robertson Savio Vega B. 123 Kid and Goldust 2 stars, Ahmed Johnson B. Tatanka 1.5 star, WWF title lumberjack match, Bret Hart B. Shawn Michaels 3 stars. March 5th Kuantan, Malaysia, NWA Steve Rickard Promotions, Rick Martel B. Viking, Dick Murdoch B. Vampire Warrior, David Heath, King Kong Bundy and Randy Rhodes B. Typhoon and Coco Ware, NWA title, Dan Severn B. Repo Man Barry Darso, Jim Neidhart B. Lance Von Erich, Kevin Vaughn March 5th Tago, IWA, Kyoko Ichiki B. Emi Motokawa, Hatsumi Hirano and Keizo Matsuda B. Tsukioka and Hiroshi Itakura, Mitsunobu Kikuzawa B. Umanosuke Ueda DQ, Leatherface B. Takashi Okano, Tarzan Goto and Mr. Ganasuke B. Cactus Jack and Keisuke Yamada. March 5th Toyama, Michinoku Pro, 1460 Grand Naniwa B. Masato Yakashiji, Yone Jinjinker Wellington Wilkins Jr., Men's Tao and Dick Togu B. Grand Hamada and Naohiro Hoshikawa, Super Delphin B. Shiryu Tiger Mask and Great Sasuke B. Shoichi Funaki and Taka Michinoku. March 5th Koriyama, Tokyo Pro Wrestling, Bloody Bruiser B. Segunda No. 1, Shigeo Okamura B. Bloody Bruise B. Great Kabuki and Akihiko Masuda B. Gecko and Garuda, Daiko Kubo Benkei B. Kishin Kawabata, Masashi Aoyagi and Takashi Ishikawa B. Mr. Pogo and Toryu. March 6th Macon, Georgia WCW Saturday Night Taping, 3,300/papered, non-squash results, WCW TV title, Lex Luger B. Johnny B. Bad to win title 3 stars, Road Warriors B. Meng and Barbarian 2 stars, Alex Wright B. Bobby Walker, David Taylor and Bobby Eaton B. Public Enemy DQ 2 stars, Eddie Guerrero B. Chris Benoit 4 stars, VK Wall Street B. Joey Maggs, Pat Tanaka B. Disco Inferno, Ric Flair and Arnold Anderson and Kevin Sullivan B. American Males and Craig Pittman. March 6th Beaumont, Texas, WWF 4987 Godwins B. Body Donnas Dud Barry Horowitz B. Guido Falcone 1 star, Justin Bradshaw B. Bob Holly 1 star, Savio Vega and Jake Roberts B. 123 Kid and Goldust 2 stars, Duke Drosy B. Hunter Hurst Helmsley 1 star, Yokozuna B. Davy Boy Smith 1 star, Shawn Michaels B. Ringmaster 2.5 stars, WWF title, Bret Hart B. Undertaker Core 2 stars. March 6th Kuantan, Malaysia, NWA Steve Rickard Promotions, Lance Von Erich B. Vampire Warrior, Repo Man D. Coco Ware, Randy Rhodes B. Evil Clown, Dick Murdoch B. Viking, Typhoon B. King Kong Bundy, NWA title, Dan Severn B. Jim Neidhart. March 6th Kita Kawabe, IWA, Kyoko Ichiki B. Emi Motokawa, Mitsunobu Kikuzawa B. Tudor the Turtle, Keizo Matsuda B. Umanosuke Ueda DQ, Keisuke Yamada and Takashi Okano B. Tsukioka and Hiroshi Itakura, Tarzan Goto and Mr. Ganasuke B. Leatherface and Cactus Jack. March 6th Jonesboro, Arkansas, North American Wrestling 160 Ricky Steele B. Dirty Little Dave, Bullpain B. Jesse James Armstrong, Colorado Kid B. Justin St. John, Reggie Montgomery B. Parker, Spiders B. Bill and Jamie Dundee. March 7th Bakersfield, California, Slammers, Jimmy James B. Buddy West DQ, Samoan Kid NC Bruce Bodine, Tyrone Little B. Hombre de Oro, Samoan Kid and Kano the Islander B. Movie Star Mike and El Toro Bravo, Jeff Lindbergh B. Dynamite D. March 8th Mexico City Arena, Mexico, EMLL, Damian El Guerrero and Espectro Jr. and Cadaver de Ultra Tumba B. Ultraman Jr. and Fantastic and Cyclone Ramirez, Mr. Niebla and Filoso and Bronco B. Felino and Guerrero de la Muerte and Scorpio Jr. DQ Bestia Salvaje and Mascara Año 2000 and Rambo B. Los Brazos, Atlantis and El Hijo del Santo and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. B. El Satanico and Negro Casas and Apollo Dantes. March 8th Tokyo Korakuen Hall, Gia, 2200 sellout, Toshie Sato B. Nakano, Mako Satomura B. Meiki Numao Bomber Hikari B. Sanoka Kato, Hikari Fukuoka and Kaoru Toshie Uematsu and Chikeo Nagashima, Shikusan Nagayo Saki Hasegawa. March 8 Sono All Japan Women 1740, Nobu Endo be Misae Watanabe. Yuka Shina be Mina Tanayama, Yoshiko Tamura be Yumi Fukawa, Tomoko Watanabe be Shaparita Asari and Kumiko Maekawa, Maami Toyota and Kaoru Ito be Reggie Bennett and Marco Yoshida. Asia Kong and Tashio Yamada and Itsuko Mita be Mima Shimoda and Yumiko Hata and Takako Inoue. March 8, Truman, Arkansas. USWA NA 400, Giant Warrior D. Justin St. John. PG-13 be Tommy Rich and Eddie Gilbert. Ryan Christopher B. Tracy Smothers, Colorado Kid B. Gator McAllister, Unified Title. Jerry Lawler NC Bill Dundee. March 8, Compton, California. Lucha Libre Mexicana. El Profeta B. Fujin. Máquina Infernal and Renegado Estrada B. El Sagrado and Falconcito de Oro. Sarco and Meteoro NC Impacto and Tutti Gonzalez. Durango Kid and Cosmos B. Depredator and Poison. Misterioso and Super Astro and Crazy Boy B. Emilio Charles Jr. and Lover Boy and Principe Joel. March 8, Cupertino, California. All Pro Wrestling. 753, Frank Dalton 1 Battle Royal, Demon Seed B. Jason Clay, Rick Turner B. Rick Thompson DQ Robert Thompson, and Matt Hyson B. Steve Rizzono and Boom Boom Kamini Chris Colby Joe Applebaumer, Cowboy Lang B. Little Nasty Boy, Mike Diamond B. Dalton. March 8, Rossville, Georgia, TWA, Joel Travis B. Tracy Black, Richie Dye and Johnny Blaze DDQ Mr. Payne and New One Man Gang, Risk Taylor NC Jimmy Sharp, Terry Watkins 1 Battle Royal. March 8, Rome, Georgia, North Georgia Wrestling Alliance, Dusty Dotson B. Tim Strong, Mike Golden B. Scott Prather, Lee Thomas B. Tommy Thompson, Demon Master B. Grave Digger, Ken and John Arden B. Bubba Humphries and Nasty Critter. March 8, Reseda, California, Slammers, Jimmy James B. Dynamite DDQ, Buddy West B. Jesus Zapata, Hombre de Oro B. Tyrone Little, Kano the Islander and Samoan Kid B. Movie Star Mike and El Toro Bravo, Jeff Lindbergh B. Bruce Bodine. March 9, Houston, WWF, 8,868 Godwins be Bodidonas 2 1/4 stars, Barry Horowitz be Guido Falcone 1 1/2 star, Duke Drosy b. Hunter Hurst Helmsley 2.5 stars, Justin Bradshaw b. Bob Holly 1 3/4 stars, Savio Vega and Jake Roberts b. Goldust and 1-2-3 Kid 1 1/2 star, Shawn Michaels b. Steve Austin 3 1/4 stars, Ahmed Johnson b. Tatanka 1 star, Yokozuna b. Davey Boy Smith Dud WWF title, Bret Hart b. Undertaker Core 1 1/2 star. March 9, Iwakuni, New Japan, 3,000 sellout, Yuji Nagata b. Koji Kanemoto, Michiyoshi Ohara and Akitoshi Saito b. Osamu Nishimura and Tadao Yasuda, Hiro Saito b. Kengo Kimura, Jushin Liger and El Samurai b. Tokumitsu Ishizawa and Wild Pegasus, Harlem Heat b. Satoshi Kojima and Shinya Hashimoto, Shinjiro Otani b. Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Masachono b. Kazuo Yamazaki and Osamu Kido, Keiji Muto and Kensuke Sasaki b. Hugh Morris and Scott Norton, Riki Chashu and Junji Hirata and Takashi Izukabe, Shiro Koshinaka and Kunyaki Kobayashi and Akira Nagami. March 9, Tokyo Karaku and Hall All Japan Women, 2,200 sellout, Marimogami b. Ko Nomi, Yoshiko Tamura and Misae Watanabe and Mina Tanayama D. Yumi Fukawa and Yuka Shina and Nobu Endo 30 minutes, Yumiko Hata b. Kumiko Maekawa, Reggie Bennett and Mariko Yoshida b. Atsuko Mita and Maekawa, Manami Toyota b. Shaparita Asari, Asia Kong and Tashio Yamada and Takako Inoue b. Saki Hasegawa and Kaoru Ito and Tomoko Watanabe 2710. March 9, Washington, North Carolina, All-Star Wrestling, 1,100 sellout, Jay Caliendo b. Mad Dog Murnick, Wahoo McDaniel b. Billy Black, Mr. Hughes b. Atom Bomb, Rob Van Dam b. Gorgeous George 3, Rick and Scott Steiner b. Hughes and Barbarian. March 9, Osaka, Yoshimoto Pro Wrestling, 525, Esther Moreno b. Chikako Shiratori, Kaori Nakayama and Megumi Kudo b. Floor Metallica and Jaguar Yokota, Bison Kimura b. Combat Toyota. March 9, Manchester, New Hampshire, Atlantic Wrestling Federation, 300, Sky King b. Scott Sharkey, Steve Bradley b. Flame, Scott Taylor b. Bulldozer DQ, Rick Fuller b. Isaac Yonkem DQ, Annihilators b. Taylor and Tony Roy, Tim McNeely b. Bob Backlund. March 9, Yazoo City, Mississippi, UWF, Rod Price b. Tim Brooks, Dink b. Lone Eagle DQ, Doink, Jason Meyer b. Ron McClarty, Sid Vicious Original and Johnny Rotten b. Medics, David Chisholm b. Kimala Jr., Terry Gordy b. Richie Dye. March 9, Brighton, Tennessee, American Wrestling Alliance, 292 Justin Williams b. Blade Boudreaux, Chris Gray b. Johnny Reb, Derek King b. Ripley Prim, Kevin Christian, Kevin Lawler, b. Colodisco Kid Bill Rush, Blackjack Daniels and Bad News NC Tim White and Randy Rocket, Gary Nations B Bullpain DQ Moon Dog Spot NC Daniels, Terry Golden and Williams B Danny B Good and David Denton. March 9th Donovan, Missouri, North American Wrestling, 330, Colorado Kid B Justin St. John Giant Warrior B Gator McAllister, Buddy Murray B Dirty Little Dave, Reggie Montgomery and Kid and Warrior B Spiders and McAllister. March 9th South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, ABWF, Billy Montana B Dragon Master, Larry Santo B Black Terminator, CM Quick B Glamour Boy DQ Montana and Terminator and Glamour Boy B Santo and Mr. Pro and Quick. March 9th Alexandria, Virginia, Independent Pro Wrestling Alliance, 255 Sellout, Big Slam Vader, Walter McDonald, B Ali Amin, Lucifer B Bob Starr, Glenn Osborne and Rebel, Chuck Williams, B Steve Corino and Chad Austin, Corporal Punishment B Earl the Pearl, Armageddon B Johnny Gunn DQ, Roger Anderson and Frank Parker B Brian Perry and Sean Powers, Jimmy Z B Cato, Cue Ball Carmichael B Iron Sheik, Bam Bam Bigelow B Jimmy Cicero. March 9th Anniston, Alabama, Dixieland Championship Wrestling, 200, David Lee B Spider-Man, Joey Maggs B War Machine, Brad Armstrong B Randy Barber DQ Brad and Steve Armstrong B Barber, and Black Scorpion, Scott Armstrong B Alan Martin. March 9th Salisbury Beach, Massachusetts, Century Wrestling Alliance, El Mascarado B Mike Lano, Big City Mike B Skull, Joel Davis B Candyman, Pink Assassin Paul Zine, Knuckles Nelson DDQ Vic Steamboat, Dungeon Master B Mike. March 9th Gore, Georgia, North Georgia Wrestling Alliance, Mike Golden B Bobby Hayes, Dusty Dotson B Kid Ego, Indian Outlaw B Mark Payne, Max Steele B Dino Stone, Ken and John Arden B Bubba Humphries and Nasty Critter. March 10th Corpus Christi, Texas, WWF Superstars taping, 3,702 Sellout, non-squash results, Savio Vega and Ahmed Johnson B 123 Kid and Tatanka 2 stars, Craig Johnson B Brooklyn Brawler, Body Donnas B Bushwhackers, Duke Drosy B Bill Irwin, Steve Austin B Aldo Montoya, Hunter Hurst Helmsley B Bob Holly, Devin Michaels and Bo Vegas B Alex Porto and Rod Price, Steve Sawyer, Bart Sawyer B Brawler, Oldust B Porto, Body Donnas B Austin and Vega, Yokozuna and Ahmed Johnson B Davey Boy Smith and Owen Hart, Vega B Tatanka, Justin Bradshaw B Barry Horowitz, Godwins B Smith and Owen Hart, Shawn Michaels B Austin 3¼ stars, WWF title, Bret Hart B Undertaker Core. March 10th Hiroshima, New Japan, 2,200 Yuji Nagata B Yutaka Yoshi, Akitoshi Saito and Kunyaki Kobayashi B Tokumitsu Ishizawa and Black Cat, Jushin Liger and El Samurai B Tatsuhito Takaiwa and Shinjiro Otani, Hiro Saito B Michiyoshi Ohara, Akira Nagami and Kengo Kimura and Shiro Koshinaka B Koji Kanemoto and Osamu Nishimura and Takashi Iizuka. Takaiwa won Battle Royal, Masa Chono and Hiroyoshi Tenzan, B Tadao Yasuda and Kensuke Sasaki, Keiji Muto and Junji Hirata B Harlem Heat, Satoshi Kojima and Shinya Hashimoto and Masa Saito B Scott Norton and Hugh Morris and Wild Pegasus. March 10th Mankato, Minnesota, Northern Premier Wrestling, Mr. Dynamic B Billy Blaze, Horace the Psychopath B Mangler, Kenny J B Night Stalker, Charlie Norris B The Hater, JB Trask DDQ Mr. JL, Jerry Lynn, Dan Jesser B Lenny Lane. March 11th San Antonio, Texas, WWF Monday Night Raw taping, 9,364 Sellout, non-squash results, Kip B Dwayne Johnson, Davey Boy Smith B Jake Roberts 1 star, Savio Vega Kerr Steve Austin, Undertaker and Yokozuna B Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith DQ, Diesel B Barry Horowitz, Bret Hart B Tatanka 2 stars, Shawn Michaels B Leif Cassidy 2¾ stars, Hunter Hurst Helmsley B Aldo Montoya, Goldust B Fatu, Ahmed Johnson B Owen Hart DQ Roberts and Johnson B Smith and Owen Hart, IC title, Goldust B Vega, Michaels B Helmsley, WWF title, Bret Hart B Undertaker Core. March 11th Winston-Salem, North Carolina, WCW Monday Nitro taping, 6,899, Diamond Dallas Page B Joey Maggs 1 star, Meng B Dave Sullivan Dud, Conan B Bobby Eaton 2½ stars, The Giant B Jim Duggan Dud, Road Warriors B Rick and Scott Steiner 3¼ stars, WCW TV title Lex Luger B Alex Wright 2¼ stars, Double Strap Lumberjack match, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and Booty Man B Arnold Anderson and Kevin Sullivan and Ric Flair 1¾ stars. Special thanks to Charles Butera, Kim Lamberth, Paul Spiegel, Michael Clementon, William Woody, Jack Thielpape, Georgianne Macropolis, David Milliken, Scott Hudson, James Titus, Ken Verrett, Adam Pennison, Mark Taylor, Mike Heimberger, Adrian Chavarria, Greg John, Sarah Moore, Kevin Heilbronner, Ken Dusay, David Milliken, Tony Friedman, Chris Jackson, Peggy Watkins, Roland Alexander, Greg Klein, Steve Dr. Lucha Sims, Rich Palladino, Sean Pascoe, Tim Knoll, Jesse Money, Bruce Mitchell, Roy Lucier. Japanese television rundown. February 24, New Japan. 1. Kazuo Yamazaki and Osamu Kido beat Keiji Muto and Kensuke Sasaki in 9:44 when Kido pinned Sasaki with an outside cradle in a big surprise finish just as Muto had Yamazaki in the figure 4. They worked a lot of submissions and it was a typical stiff match. 3 stars. 2. El Samurai retained the UWA light heavyweight title beating Dean Malenko via submission in 13:24 with the old Fuller leg lock. Disappointing considering who was involved. 2 stars. 3. Geto and Hiromichi Fuyuki beat Hiro Saito and Hiroyoshi Tenzan in 14:21 when Jado interfered and hit Tenzan with a chair and Fuyuki pinned him with a running lariat. A lot of wild action with Jado and Masachono both getting involved, but it was overall sloppy and didn't build. 1.5 star. 4. Yoji Anjo and Yoshihiro Takayama earned the tag title shot beating Satoshi Kojima and Osamu Nishimura in 13:27 when Anjo made Nishimura submit to his version of the figure 4. Match was good in spots and terrible in others. Takayama is just horrible, but Anjo was pretty good. 1.5 star. March 2, New Japan. 1. Jushin Liger and Black Tiger beat Shinjiro Otani and Koji Kanemoto in 13 minutes when Tiger pinned Otani with a brainbuster. Basically an excellent match with Liger and Tiger debuting as part of the new 4 Horsemen. 4 stars. 2. Riki Choshu and Satoshi Kojima beat Michiyoshi Ohara and Shiro Koshinaka when Kojima pinned Ohara with an elbow off the top rope in 8:03. 2.25 stars. 3. Shinya Hashimoto and Junji Hirata beat Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Hiro Saito when Hashimoto pinned Saito after a brainbuster in 11:18. 2 stars. 4. Koshinaka pinned Tenzan in 5:29 with a dragon suplex. Koshinaka came out with Tatsumi Fujinami, who visually is really showing his age, and Akira Nagami, with his new skinhead crew cut haircut. Match wasn't as good as you'd expect. 2.75 stars. March 3, All Japan. 1. Mitsuharu Misawa retained the Triple Crown pinning Gary Albright after the discus forearm. The match had awesome psychology and some great spots. Albright's strengths are that the crowd believes in him, which is a great deal of the battle in Japan, and every suplex, which they built up to perfectly, got a huge pop. The match went a little long for an Albright singles match and lost ground toward the end. Not at the level of a typical Budokan main event, but a very good world title match. 3.5 stars. EMLL pretty slow here. Vampiro Canadiense has agreed to return on the next tour of Arena Mexico. He's mainly been wrestling for Promel the past several weeks. The March 8 Arena Mexico main event saw Atlantis and Elio Del Santo and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. over Apollo Dantes and El Satanico and Negro Casas when Rayo made Dantes, the CMLL heavyweight champ, submit in the third fall to set up a title rematch at some point. They may feud heels Mano Negra and Dr. Wagner Jr. as on the March 5 show at Arena Coliseo. The two of them teamed with Leo del Gladiador to lose to Dos Caras and Lizmark and Silver King when Negra accidentally used a Frankensteiner on Wagner, which set him up for the third fall pin. AAA. This group returns to local television in Los Angeles on CH22 at 1:30 p.m. every Sunday starting on March 17. They've taped television back in Nezahualcóyotl the past 2 Friday nights. On the March 1 show, they failed to sell out the building for the first time all year, drawing about 2,200. It was poorly promoted, even though it was Pero Aguayo's first match back. Apparently the March 1 show was slated for Aguayo's hometown of Zacatecas, but it fell through at the last minute. Conan and Aguayo and CN Cars teamed on top to beat Cibernetico and Pierroth Jr. and Killer in a match where Janet continually interfered, and the fans threw plenty of things at her the entire match until Antonio Pena came out and took her out of there after she took a beer shot. Heavy Metal once again turned heel on Torero in the semifinal, including fouling him so he was pinned in the third fall. After the match, Torero made a comeback and attacked Heavy. The AAA Diabolicos vs UWA Diabolicos feud continues to be a hot one, and they had another bloodbath on March 1, which set up Rocky Santana, UWA vs Angel Mortal in a hair match coming out of it for March 8. The March 8 show was back to a sellout of 3,000 with Santana beating Mortal in the hair match and Los Villanos becoming the first AAA Trios champions, winning the tournament final over Heavy and Latin Lover and CN Cars.
which were the two teams that won the earlier tournaments. In that match, both Heavy and Cars both turned heel on Latin. Also on the show, Octagon brought out Pantera from EMLL and talked about him being a new partner. It looks like Octagon and Pantera and Ultimo Dragon will become a regular trio. Pantera came out with the CMLL welterweight title and said he was giving back the title because he was joining AAA. Principe Zafiro has had his ring name changed to Mascara Sagrada Jr. It's more because Pena has been having trouble with the original Mascara Sagrada, and since the gimmick was Pena's first, he wants to keep the gimmick alive if he gets rid of or has to tone down the original. He was booed unmercifully in his debut. Apparently there is heat because Sagrada went behind Pena's back trying to get the rights for himself of the gimmick. The Car's turn was hinted at about a week earlier at a show in Querétaro when he teamed with Mascara Sagrada and Tinieblas Jr. against Killer and Fishman and Jerry Estrada. During the match, Sagrada and Tinieblas accidentally double clotheslined Cars, who then walked out on them. He returned later in the match with Janet and joined in a 4-on-2 attack of the two remaining faces until Volador and Torero came in for the save. That same Querétaro show saw one of those incredible 4-stars plus matches with Venom and Rey Mysterio Jr. and Frisbee beating Super Crazy, who is going to be the next heel superstar in Mexico, and Psicosis and Juventud Guerrera. From what I was told, it would take March 4th of a page just to run down all the amazing spots done in this match. Because they are doing a television taping on March 15th in Nezahualcóyotl, the Tijuana show at the Palenque was moved to March 16th with a triple headliner of Ultraman vs. Psicosis in a mask vs. mask match, Mysterio Jr. vs. Juventud Guerrera for the WWA welterweight title in a cage match with Cibernetico and KGB and Jerry Estrada vs. Conan and Octagon and La Parka. They will be returning to Tijuana with a major show on March 29th for those of you coming in for WrestleMania from out of town. Not that anyone would actually go, as I've never figured out the cultural deal as to why fans will literally come from hours in every direction to major ECW shows, but Americans won't come even from San Diego to Tijuana for shows that are generally of similar caliber. The Tijuana shows starting this weekend are going to go back to more lucha style as opposed to crazy I.W.A./ECW style because of problems with the commission. Apparently, since the shows will be toned down, the group can go back to running Mexicali as soon as the end of the month. MS1 Jr. from CMLL is wrestling here under the name Ebola and debuted on March 6 in Aguascalientes in a match with Estrada and Guerrera against Sagrada and Tinieblas Jr. and Mysterio Jr. on the same card where Pentagon suffered his blackout. People are raving about his potential, but he appeared a bit nervous in his first couple of AAA matches. Told the same about Ultimo Dragon, that he was a bit nervous for his debut that night. That show drew about 3,800. Jason the Terrible from FMW is also headed in. They returned to Monterrey and Nuevo Laredo for television tapings on March 17th and March 18th. Monterrey is headlined by Aguayo defending the WWA heavyweight title against Cibernetico, and there is a good chance of a title switch. Pero Aguayo Jr. is expected back in April. He apparently took time off to get surgery on his nose. Another newcomer everyone is raving about is Fugaz, who I'm told reminds people of Negro Casas at the same age. Psicosis retore open his lips similar to what happened at the ECW show, but still didn't miss any shots and didn't work any differently since it happened. There are negotiations which are getting more serious on a weekly basis for AAA to get a regular weekend time slot on a major American Spanish language network, which would multiply the potential viewing audience. They are looking at a date in May to return to Chicago at the Amphitheater, New Japan. 3 more matches have been officially added to the April 29th Tokyo Dome show: Great Muta vs. Jinsei Shinzaki Hakushi, who has left the WWF, Randy Savage vs. Hiroyoshi Tenzan, and Lex Luger vs. Masa Chono. The final 3 matches on the card are expected to be announced sometime this week. I'd expect Chono to beat Luger to return the favor for Chono putting Luger over at Starrcade. I wouldn't expect the same logic to prevail in the Savage-Tenzan match because Savage has a major American superstar aura in Japan, and even though Tenzan had to carry the match last time and is this group's rising star, the thought would likely be that just being in the ring with Savage and losing a close match to him would elevate his standing. Jushin Liger, Black Tiger, Wild Pegasus and El Samurai are now known as the New Generation 4 Horsemen, or the Junior Horsemen, doing the 4 fingers sign. The UWFI show on March 23rd in Sendai will be UWFI vs. Heisei Shingun One Night Feud with Nobuhiko Takada and Naoki Sano vs. Shiro Koshinaka and Michiyoshi Ohara, Yoji Anjo and Kenichi Yamamoto vs. Akira Nagami and Kuniaki Kobayashi, Masahiko Kakihara vs. Akitoshi Saito and Hiromitsu Kanehara vs. Kengo Kimura. They also announced a show on April 19th in Osaka, and it was announced that the main event would be a tag match with Takada and a partner against Riki Choshu and a partner, which would be the first Choshu vs. Takada meeting since the feud started. UWFI is also working on a show in Taiwan. The new tour began on March 9th in Iwakuni. On the first night, the WCW wrestlers split as Scott Norton and Hugh Morris lost to Keiji Muto and Kensuke Sasaki, while Harlem Heat beat Satoshi Kojima and Shinya Hashimoto.
Apparently Heat didn't exactly take the world by storm, as even though they have to headline the Nagoya show on March 20th battling for the tag title, they already did a job on their second night in for Muto and Junji Hirata when Muto made Booker T submit to the figure 4 leglock. March 2nd television show did a 1.7 rating, while the All Japan television show on March 3rd did a 2.6. Other Japan notes. Oleg Toktarov is again slated to make his pro wrestling debut for Pancrase later this year, perhaps around May or June. Toktarov was originally slated to debut in November, but he and his management team decided not to break training for the Ultimate at that time since the money offer apparently wasn't that great. Kyoko Inoue suffered a broken shoulder when Kaoru Ito landed wrong on her doing a senton, but it expected back on March 20th, so she'll be doing the Yokohama Arena match with Manami Toyota on WrestleMania Day. It appears that Dan Severn will wrestle Tarzan Goto on April 3rd in Nagoya for IWA, although the match itself wasn't officially announced. It's kind of a surprise to me in that Severn's dealings with IWA last year were through Victor Quiñones, who is no longer affiliated with IWA. However, when Severn backed out of a November date for IWA because it was going to interfere with training for Ultimate, he promised he'd return when his schedule let him. This date would be 6 weeks before his Shamrock match. The other surprise is that it's well known that New Japan wants Severn for a major push. Takashi Ishikawa's mystery partner in his own tag team tournament will be Yoji Anjo. They did an angle behind it where the new belts, supposedly the most expensive belts ever in Japan, filled with diamonds, were examined by Anjo and a diamond expert. He brought the expert to the Tokyo Pro offices to look at the belts to determine if the diamonds were real, and when he was assured they were, he said he'd like to enter the tourney. Mr. Pogo went to the War offices to challenge Genichiro Tenryu to a singles match on April 19th in Sapporo, which I guess is indication that the deal where Tenryu fired Pogo because his style was too violent was a work to set up a singles match, as it appeared to be. Bart Vale entered the K1 Grand Prix kickboxing tournament on March 10th at Yokohama Arena before a sellout 16,860 fans. Vale lost in the first round of the tourney to Andy Hug in 2:24 of round 1 via TKO. Kit Likens, who is from Battle Creek, Michigan, and has been at some of the UFC events and was billed as a training partner of Severn's, lost in 37 seconds to a Japanese guy named Musashi, who they are grooming to be the top native star of K1 now that Masaki Sadake is past his prime. Kenichi Yamanuchi, 25, a former major leaguer in the Japanese Baseball League, will be going into pro wrestling with the Tokyo Pro Wrestling Company. Yamanuchi was a pro player in the Dai Hawks chain from 1988 to 1994, but in that time played only 7 games in the Japanese majors for the Hawks and was hitless. The only shows of the past week at Korakuen Hall were both women's events. Gia drew a sellout 2,200 on March 8th because of an interpromotional main event with Chigusa Nagio against soon-to-be-retired Saki Hasegawa, whose final match is March 31st. The deal is that Hasegawa's hero as a kid was Nagio. Nagio, whose look and style since coming out of retirement is totally different than in her days as a national celebrity with the Crush Gals when she was the athletic hero to so many girls in Japan, reverted back in this match. She came out to her 80s ring music in an 80s costume and Hasegawa started crying before the match even started. Apparently Hasegawa was so emotional about the whole deal that the match was disappointing in quality. All Japan women sold out Korakuen on March 9th with Asia Kong and Toshio Yamada and Takako Inoue beating Hasegawa and Kaoru Ito and Tomoko Watanabe in 27-10, when Yamada pinned Hasegawa. After the match, Hasegawa asked Takako Inoue for a singles match before she retires, and that bout takes place on March 16th. A correction from last week. We reported that the Headhunters going to FMW would be their return after a several-year absence. Actually, they had never worked previously for FMW. USWA Jerry Lawler regained the unified title for the 4,035th time, actually 22nd, in the tournament on March 4th in Memphis, beating Mabel at the finals via DQ when Mo interfered. The 2 unique first-round matchups saw Lawler and Brian Christopher go the time limit, with Lawler advancing via coin flip, and Mo versus Mabel, which ended up with Mo simply forfeiting the match, giving Mabel the first-round bye. Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert kept the tag titles, beating PG-13 in the Loser Leaves Town match. It was at least hinted on television that PG-13 would return under masks. The show drew approximately 1,000 fans. There is no show this week in Memphis since the Coliseum is all booked up for the circus. They were considering doing a show at a local high school,
but there is a Tennessee law about running pro wrestling at a school in that a portion of the proceeds have to go to a charitable cause and certain permits that go with it that weren't taken care of in time, so the next show will be on March 18th.
Yoshi Kwan, Chris Champion aka David Ashford Smith, debuted this week doing the same martial arts gimmick he did with WCW. Sid Vicious continued to work as an announcer with no angle involved. Although the story about the career-ending injury is definitely a work since he worked an indie show on March 9th in Yazoo City, Mississippi. That was probably his first match back since getting injured in the WWF. No word at press time about a WWF return. They did an angle to program Men on a Mission against Jesse James Armstrong. Mom were complaining that they never were treated fairly when they had been in the USWA previously. After winning a tag match on television and continuing to beat on the jobbers, Armstrong came out and ran them off using a chair.
Reports are that Brian Christopher recently became engaged.
No, not to himself.
They've already started a USWA versus North American Wrestling, Burt Prentice's Operation, feud on Prentice's television.
The first combined show was on March 8th in Truman, Arkansas, drawing nearly 400 fans, and the crowd was largely pro-NAW. Jerry Lawler worked as the heel after a few minutes in his match against Bill Dundee for the unified title that he had won 4 days earlier.
Randy Hales, USWA booker, was in Lawler's corner. You can see what's coming next.
After a ref bump, Lawler used an illegal piledriver and Hales counted the pin.
Dundee then punches Hales and Lawler, and then Burt Prentice, who was in Dundee's corner, counts as Dundee pinned Lawler.
The ref, who was in NAW ref, got in the ring and agreed with Prentice, his boss, and ruled Dundee as the winner, and Prentice grabbed the belt. All the USWA wrestlers, except Jamie Dundee, stood behind Lawler in a stare down with the NAW wrestlers who were behind Dundee. Wolfie D then grabbed the belt from Dundee and gave it to Lawler. They'll return with a rematch on April 5th with a special ref who may wind up being Sid. At least at the present time there are no plans for Prentice and his crew to go on the USWA television, and the storyline on the NAW television isn't that one group or another are the heels, although Hales is working as a heel, but they are two promotions that are competitive with one another that are working together. ECW Raven will be kept out of action for 2 weeks so he can clear up his gout condition, so the shows this weekend have been changed.
On March 15th in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, it'll be Shane Douglas and Tommy Dreamer, in his first match back since tearing up his shoulder, versus Bruise Brothers in a Falls Count Anywhere match. 2 Cold Scorpio versus Sabu for the TV title, as versus Mikey Whipwreck, Eliminators defending the tag titles against Pitbulls.
Sandman versus Axel Rotten and Chris Jericho versus Stevie Richards. March 16th in Glen Olden, Pennsylvania has Sandman and Douglas versus Bruise Brothers, Scorpio versus New Jack for the TV title, Sabu versus Mustafa, Eliminators defending against Pitbulls, Taz versus Whipwreck, and more. Here and there. A lot of news is expected to break over the next week regarding the multi-promotional show in Los Angeles. Antonio Inoki will be in town for several days starting midweek, and Eric Bischoff will be meeting with Inoki regarding the show before you read this, and Bischoff is expected to be at the press conference on March 15th in Los Angeles where the show will be announced. Greg Price drew a sellout 1,000 for a spot show in Washington, North Carolina on March 9th with Rick and Scott Steiner over Mr. Hughes and Barbarian in a Falls Count Anywhere match on top, plus a reported 3.5 stars match with Rob Van Dam over Gorgeous George 3. They also had a retirement ceremony for Wahoo McDaniel, who beat Billy Black in the undercard.
I think that makes about his 20th retirement show of the past year plus.
Newark, California Cable
CH6 will be doing some sort of a wrestling talk show on March 29th in which Pepper Gomez and Ray Stevens are scheduled to make live appearances, and Bret Hart will be taped as he'll be in Northern California doing promotional work for WrestleMania.
Congrats to Ron Lemieux, who does our hotline on Wednesdays and Sundays, on the birth of his third child, a girl, on March 5th. Century Wrestling Alliance will be running shows every Saturday night at Champs Arena in Salisbury Beach, Massachusetts. A dressing room deal took place involving Manny Fernandez on March 2nd in Concord, NC for Carolina Championship Wrestling. According to our reports, Fernandez saw local manager Kevin Casey and there must have been some heat from the past because he slapped him twice very hard and left the dressing room. Most of the wrestlers were in a state of shock. Because of the incident, along with other problems, co-promoter Tony Hunter, who was running the show along with Willie Clay, quit the promotion, as did Casey, Buddy Porter, Colt Steele, Ricky Nelson, David Isley, L.A. Stevens, Sal Corrente, Gary Royal, Rick Link, and Kevin Kirby.
Pro Wrestling America out of the Minneapolis area will start on
CH41 in St. Cloud, Minnesota starting in April, which can be picked up in the Twin Cities area.
They ran a show on February 24th in St. Paul, drawing more than 400 fans, with Blacktop Bully and Nails vs. Tom Zenk and Charlie Norris on top, and drew 350 on March 3rd in Red Lake, Minnesota at the casino, with Norris and Sam Houston vs. Stormtroopers as the headliner.
The Steve Rickard International Tour went through Malaysia this past week, with Dan Severn as NWA champion defending the title against the likes of Jim Neidhart and Repo Man.
Los Angeles indie wrestler Meteoro suffered a broken arm on the March 8th Compton show trying to do the Otani springboard dropkick into the ring, but landing wrong in the ring. On that show, Misterioso, Super Astro and Emilio Charles Jr. from Mexico worked. Apparently Misterioso has left AAA since we haven't seen his name in a while, and because the Compton promotion is no longer booking with AAA.
Mil Mascaras returns to Compton on March 15th, since he'll be in Southern California anyway for the Big Indio show over the weekend, and Silver King and El Texano are on the Compton show this week as well. I guess the promotion can draw a few hundred people and still make out paying Mascaras his $2,000 per shot guarantee, although economically I can't see how it adds up. Billy Graham ran an inspirational message combined with a wrestling match, Jake Roberts vs. Billy Anderson, and a video show on his and Roberts' career on March 3rd in Phoenix before 6,500 at a local church.
Reports we received on it were very positive. UFC The Arizona Republic ran a front-page story on UFC on March 7th, which was more balanced than most, despite the fact John McCain is from the area. It even mentioned that people think McCain's crusade against UFC is biased because of his own past history as a boxer and his being well known as an avid boxing fan.
Dan Severn said UFC is getting a bad rap, saying, "It's not a bloodfest. You've got people out there who are skilled athletes. I believe there's an unwritten code of conduct.
The fighters are not out there looking in the crowd to see whether the thumbs is up or down like in the old Coliseum days."
Severn's wife Terry, who was on 2020 and appeared to be knocking UFC, came off differently in this article, saying she's happy with her husband being involved in UFC and that she said she told him 2 years ago that if this would help pay the bills he should go for it, although admitting that she and her 4 children haven't watched any of his fights. She said she wouldn't let her kids watch boxing either and that they aren't embarrassed by being involved in UFC, but don't believe it's something appropriate for young children. The newspaper also brought out the irony that North Phoenix Baptist Church, which is where Severn did a lot of his training for Ultimate and will also for the Shamrock fight, is the same church that McCain attends, and the pastor of the church is a UFC fan.
Reverend Richard Hamilton said of McCain that one day I hope we will be able to sit at a table and chat. I'd like the man.
He'd get my vote. We just happen to disagree on this issue. Hamilton brought up that there have been hundreds of deaths in pro boxing and blamed the gloves. Gloves don't protect the head.
They protect the hands.
In boxing, you can get hit in the head more times with a gloved hand than you can in UFC bare-knuckled fighting. However, he said the downside to UFC was the participation of Tank Abbott. Tank is a black eye to the whole martial arts community. He just wants to take money and hurt people. That's all he's there for. WCW.
From the live Monday Nitro before 6,899 fans paying $68,600 on March 11th in Winston-Salem, North Carolina saw Giant pin Jim Duggan with a choke slam in 6:29 VUD.
During the match, Brian Pillman came out with 2 large banners which read "Call Brian 1-900-288 Pill." Eric Bischoff is still trying to work everyone on this angle as he went so nuts behind the scenes that several employees actually believe he was mad about Pillman interrupting the show. However, by working the cameramen and directors, legitimately almost nobody knew about Pillman being there, they avoided any shots of him and the whole thing was ineffective. Steve Grissom was interviewed.
If you think they spend far too much time each week on him, and you wouldn't be alone in that assessment, it's a Harvey Schiller deal and thus WCW pretty much has to go along with it. Steiner showed up and gave the Road Warriors a match 10 times better than anything the Warriors have done since they came back.
After lots of big moves and both teams using their finishers on the other, Animal hit Rick with a spiked elbow pad and Hawk pinned him in 10:09, 3¼ stars.
Steiners did a post-match interview basically saying they haven't been around because they've been chasing the Road Warriors and they want them to start a new feud.
Warriors seemed to have slightly more cheers but neither team was booed. Lex Luger pinned Alex Wright to keep the TV title in 6:26 after Jimmy Hart knocked Wright off the top rope, 2¼ stars. The Luger/Hart stuff has been great over the past week. It's the first time in close to 10 years that Hart has shown the stuff that most people don't even realize he was doing in the early 80s in Memphis. The two argued again after the match. Maine saw Hulk Hogan and Booty Man and Randy Savage over Ric Flair and Arnold Anderson and Kevin Sullivan in 6:29 when Hogan leg dropped Flair. It was a double strap match with lumberjacks with straps and all the wrestlers with straps. The match had a lot of heat but was too short and had no focus and basically sucked. 1 3/4 stars. Flair and Anderson did an amazing job in the post-match.
Told that live, every match had great heat and it was an amazing contrast to most of the house shows in the Greensboro market over the past few years with small crowds and nobody caring.
The Wake Forest basketball team, which plays in the same arena, was at the show at ringside, never acknowledged on television, which was a big mistake. Heavily cheering on Flair. Flair got about 70% cheers and Hogan 30% cheers, although nobody cheered Sullivan.
Gorgeous George 3 and Gimmick was also in the crowd but never acknowledged on television, and there were Hogan sucks chants during the main event.
Diamond Doll came out again with flowers and they said that she was interested in Booty Man. It was also good to see the positive effects of the foolproof WCW steroid policy, foolproof as in only a fool can't figure out a way around it.
No word at all what next week's show will be. In the live versus live battle, my feeling is WCW had a better show for most wrestling fans because of having the surprise Road Warrior Steiner's dream match.
That probably explains some of the live ratings win, with WCW getting a 3.2 rating and 4.7 share to Raw's 2.9 and 4.2. It also explains the record-setting replay number of a 1.5 that the show got.
Also over the weekend, WCW Saturday Night drew a 3.0 rating and Pro did a 1.8, while Main Event was preempted. For the week ending February 25th, the entire WCW network was seen in 6.3 million homes on 178 stations, and WWF was seen in 4.9 million homes on 159 stations.
WCW Saturday Night for the weekend was taped March 6 before 3,300 fans in Macon, Georgia. Luger beat Bad for the TV title when Page interfered in a good match. In a post-match interview, Bad yelled at Diamond Doll and challenged Page at Uncensored.
Road Warriors beat Mang and Barbarian in a bad match.
David Taylor and Bobby Eaton beat Public Enemy via DQ when they used a table in a match better than it sounds on paper. Eddie Guerrero pinned Chris Benoit in a 4 stars match. Expect Guerrero to get a major push since they did a marketing survey and found that out of all the wrestlers in WCW, the wrestler with the highest likability quotient was Guerrero. The study also surprised people with other items, such as there was a major correlation between how much the general public liked someone and their work rate, and that Alex Wright was also a surprise in how much he was liked, and they were surprised at how disliked Hulk Hogan was and how Sting fared well, but not nearly as well as people figured he would. They did another deal with Hart and Luger, where as expected Hart pulled Luger out of the street fight into the Doomsday Cage match, and Luger got mad at Hart because he said Sting was his friend. Loch Ness then got mad at Hart because he came all the way from England for a shot at Hogan and he was being pulled out and Loch shoved Lex. Can you imagine a match between those two? TV Main saw Flair and Anderson and Sullivan over Males and Craig Pittman. Loch Ness and Jim Duggan were also supposed to be involved, but Loch Ness didn't show because he was mad at the Dungeon of Doom over the previous incident, and Giant brawled with Duggan to the back, taking him out of the match. After the match, the heels whipped the faces with straps to set up Monday Nitro, and they also whipped ref Nick Patrick and Doug Dillinger. In a dark match on the show, Kid Flash, a newcomer from Northeastern Indies that Kevin Sullivan probably saw on a Tony Rumble show, done a tryout match with Chris Kanyon. He was green in spots and they missed some things early, but it built into a tremendous match and was said to have been the most impressive tryout of any newcomer since Sean Waltman, who did the best tryout in years and then promptly didn't get the job because they thought he was too small. Lots of heat already on Lee Marshall since Gene Okerlund sees him as a threat. He shouldn't.
Randy Savage appeared on Chet Kopic this past week.
Halloween Havoc will take place outdoors at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas on October 27th, which is the same arena WWF had the live fiasco of a WrestleMania show because of poor sight lines and hour-long lines getting in and out a few years back. However, Slim Jims is putting up $300,000 in sponsor money if it's in Vegas, and that clinches the deal. Because the show is considered too weak for the city, the May 19th Slamboree show has been moved from Chicago to Baton Rouge. WCW Hotline is once again banning any mention of anything or anyone having any connection with WWF from orders that came directly from Ted Turner and Schiller. WWF. Highlights of the weekend television tapings. Superstars taping, which was said to be better than the Raw taping this time around, before a sellout 3,702 fans paying $43,620 on March 10th in Corpus Christi. Show sold out 4 hours ahead of time and turned away 2,000. Opened with Savio Vega and Ahmed Johnson over 1-2-3 Kid and Tatanka.
A newcomer named either Craig Johnson or Dwayne Johnson got a pin over Brooklyn Brawler. Not sure who the guy was, but it was a tryout match and he looked green, but okay. The Sicilian Studs, Guido Falcone aka Tim Roberts and Vito Mussolini aka Ken Rara, got a tryout and didn't look good.
Then in the tag tourney, the Body Donnas beat Bushwhackers. Bill Irwin lost to Duke Droese.
Ringmaster had his name changed to Stone Cold Steve Austin, which was the name used on Raw the next night. Isaac Yankem was still around, as was evidenced on Raw the next night.
Hunter Hearst Helmsley beat Bob Holly. High Voltage beat Alex Porto and Rod Price in a tryout for All 4, but I'm told it wasn't good. Harvey Whippleman Downtown Bruno was back managing Brawler in a losing effort against Steve Sawyer, WCW jobber Bart Sawyer, in a match where Sawyer looked okay, which was also probably a tryout. Mankind, Cactus Jack, debuted with a mask. Everyone in the building recognized him and chanted Cactus Jack at him. He looked okay. Jerry Lawler did a TV squash where he did his own color commentary, which was said to have been a hilarious segment. In the tag tourney, and I'm not sure how this will be explained, because of Ramon's suspension, they had Vega team with Austin against Body Donas in the semis, and of course Austin turned on Vega, causing them to lose. In a match with Roddy Piper handcuffed to Jim Cornette, Yokozuna and Ahmed Johnson beat Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith when Piper hit Owen with the tennis racket and Yoko pinned him. Vega beat Tatanka and Justin Hawk Bradshaw beat Horowitz. In the other tag tourney semi, Godwins beat Owen and Smith via DQ when the New Rockers came out as heels and Leif Cassidy was acting goofy and came off the top rope on Henry Godwin for the DQ. In dark matches, Shawn Michaels beat Steve Austin and Bret Hart beat Undertaker via count out. Raw on March 11th in San Antonio before a sellout 9,364 paying $75,672 opened with Skip beating Craig or Dwayne Johnson. Diesel did a dark interview designed to turn him heel for reaction later in the show, saying he hated Shawn Michaels, who is from San Antonio, and insulted all of Michaels fans. On the live Raw show, Diesel did a quick interview where they strongly teased the idea he was going to turn on Michaels at the house shows this coming weekend, and where he came off as a total heel. Smith pinned Jake Roberts. Yankem did a squash which wound up with Lawler insulting Mark Henry, a weightlifter who is being sponsored by the WWF, and who will probably end up as a pro wrestler after the Olympics if he makes the team. They're billing him as the strongest man in the world, and he's pretty damn strong, although most people in that world seem to view a guy named Anthony Clark as the strongest man in the country right now. Henry pressed and dropped Lawler. On the live show, Vega double count out Austin in a decent match. They did a segment where Roddy Piper and Goldust had a confrontation. Piper was unbelievable here, the way he carried the segment and got the match over. It's the best work he's done in wrestling in years. Every young wrestler should study that for how to do an interview to get something over. They aired clips of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels training at Mania. Michaels was being trained by Jose Lothario, who was his original trainer right out of high school. Lothario was the big draw in San Antonio in the early 70s and was a pretty big name in wrestling during his prime. Hart was shown being trained by his father. Bret made a remark during his interview, which came off as almost a total shoot interview, that he's never seen a tough Mexican wrestler, with the idea that Michaels was trained in Mexican style since Lothario, who is from Mexico, was his trainer, and because aspects of his style are lucha libre oriented, which got him an amazing amount of heat within hours on the West Coast. TV Main saw Undertaker and Yokozuna beat Smith and Owen via DQ. This was nothing as a match. Diesel came out and clotheslined Paul Bearer, and Undertaker chased Diesel to the back. This left Yoko against both, and he was holding his own until Vader showed up for the DQ, and it destroyed him until Ahmed Johnson and Roberts showed up. Matches taped for upcoming Raw shows saw Diesel, first match back from the injury, working as a total heel, beat Horowitz. Bret beat Tatanka when Kid's interference backfired. Michaels beat Cassidy. Lothario was at ringside doing Spanish announcing. Jannetty came out and tripped Michaels to officially turn him heel. Bret came out and confronted him, and it wound up with Bret and Michaels in a stare down. Helmsley beat Montoya, Goldust over Fatu, who will probably be switched into a new role as a member of a gang tag team with his cousin Samu. Johnson beat Hart via DQ and Smith interfered, etc. House business continued strong all week as they drew $4,023 and $56,239 in Austin on March 5th, $4,987 and $49,337 in Beaumont on March 6th, $3,202 and $38,757 in Tyler on March 7th, and $8,868 and $108,279 on March 9th in Houston. Owen Hart missed a few shots during the week with a bad knee. Jannetty missed several dates with a shoulder injury, and as far as wrestling itself goes hasn't returned, although he did angles at television. We forgot last week to list the ratings for the weekend of March 2nd, as Mania did a 1.5 and Action Zone a 2.0. For the weekend of March 9th, the numbers were 1.7 and 1.9. For those in this area, Bret Hart will be doing a pre-WrestleMania autograph session at 5 p.m. at Valco Mall in Cupertino on March 29th. Hakushi is history.
They did Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels lumberjack matches in Providence, Rhode Island on March 4th, 4 stars, and Austin, Texas on March 5th, 3 stars, with Owen and Smith's interference giving Bret the win. The May 26th In Your House was switched from Barry, ONT to Florence, South Carolina, and the subsequent TV tapings will be Raw on May 27th in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Superstars on May 28th in North Charleston, South Carolina. Jim Hellwig would only let a professional bodybuilding photographer shoot his pub photos, so as to know to highlight the strengths and hide the weaknesses in the physique, so Titan had to bring in the son on Jim Manion to do his pub photos. The irony here is that Manion was a bitter enemy of McMahon's during the bodybuilding business promotional war that McMahon lost several years back. Supposedly 6 people have gotten Bob Backlund's autograph since he went on his insanity kick by naming all of the presidents in order. WWF has made a play to bring in Rey Mysterio Jr. As of this point, it isn't going to happen.
This week's Billionaire Ted was pretty much a nothing, with a guy doing a poor Mean Gene asking people to call his hotline, 1-900 lying baldy, and him showing Hogan as a feeble old man needing oxygen to keep from dying while training, and Savage trying to get treatment for his baldness. The reader's pages. HIV with the Tommy Morrison stuff. The first thing I thought of was April 1995 at the ECW Arena when I counted 12 guys who bladed. When the Pitbulls and Public Enemy went into the crowd, we were running away from pools of blood. I spoke with an indie worker last year and asked him if he worries about AIDS, and he said we try to know who we're working with. Wrestling is in for a rude awakening if a prominent guy gets HIV. Even though blading is fairly non-existent in the Big Two, sooner or later, someone is coming down with it. People have mentioned steroids and needles as a possible cause with Morrison. I don't even want to think about that can of worms being opened up. Blading is potentially a bigger problem for this business than steroids. Harley York. Bronxville, New York. Wrestling War. While I thought the Billionaire Ted skits were amusing at first, the novelty has worn off. If McMahon wants to get even with WCW for giving away results and showing footage of current WWF wrestlers getting beat when they were in WCW, he should run tapes of Hogan and Savage from the mid-80s. That would reinforce the point WCW is just using WWF retreads and that Hogan and Savage's acts haven't changed or their wrestling skill improved in the past 10 years. If McMahon is successful in derailing the Turner/Time Warner merger, or if WCW is cut loose to have the deal, he'll have scored a resounding victory and humiliated both Turner and that smug moron Bischoff. If WCW is dropped to save the merger, it'll have a difficult time staying afloat unless Turner is willing to carry the company as a separate holding outside the Time Warner corporate structure. Should WCW go under, which would be bad for pro wrestling even though the promotion is terrible and has been for a long time, it doesn't take Nostradamus to predict there are a slew of former WWF employees who are going to be finished in the business. Tony Greco. Cornwall, New York. For the short term, I'm enjoying the WWF/WCW war. I think it will eventually hurt American wrestling long term. At first I thought the Billionaire Ted skits were amusing, but now I'm sick of them. Vince McMahon is becoming one desperate man. It also ticks me off the way McMahon is reacting after he basically ran all the small promotions off the map. Everything WCW is currently doing, both good and bad, is exactly what McMahon did in the 80s. I guess he can dish it out, but he can't take it. He's acting like a big baby, and the tactics he's resorting to is evidence of it. For the long-term future of both WWF and WCW, it would do McMahon good to sit down with Eric Bischoff and try to work together. That could be the biggest thing for American wrestling in a long time. I'm no Bischoff fan, but he has shown borderline brilliance in the way he is now handling this war. Joey Sprinkle. Roseburg, Oregon. My view of pro wrestling is that it's pretty sad. I think Vince McMahon has ruined the business in many ways, and now that he can no longer be the kingpin, he's behaving pretty much like a fool. Jim Ricks. Florissant, Missouri.